Chapter 674. The Chiyu saber was extremely fierce and demonic. It was an extremely terrifying ancient demonic weapon. During the Great War of the Shamans and Demons, Chiyu had killed countless demons and refined it with the blood of hundreds of millions of demons. The day the saber was completed, it was an extremely terrifying demonic weapon. With the Chiyu demonic saber in hand, it meant that he was going all out. He had already treated Yi Xian as a dead man because no one could survive under the Chiyu saber. Die. The demonic saber was shocking and ferocious. When Chiyu slashed out, the saber radiance appeared and slashed towards Yi Xian like a waterfall from the 9 heavens. The darkness was boundless and murderous. Yi Xian laughed maniacally. Perhaps others would be afraid of the demonic saber in Chiyu's hand, but the heaven-destroying halberd was the #1 killing weapon in history. Yi Xian did not take the Chiyu saber seriously at all. Rumble. When the halberd struck out, the heavens fell and the earth cracked. The halberd was too dark and too bright. The dark aura that could destroy everything rumbled and surged. A cold light that penetrated the heavens and earth bloomed. Clang. The two weapons clashed. With a loud explosion, the heavens and earth within thousands of miles were distorted. It was as if the heavens and earth were going to collapse under the attack of the two. With a groan, flesh and blood were cut off. An extremely shocking thing happened. The heaven-destroying halberd ignored the power of the Chiyu saber and sent it flying. The ancient demonic saber let out a sorrowful cry. The cold tip of the halberd pierced through Chiyu's shoulder blade, causing the demon god of the shaman tribe to groan in pain. Ancient shaman. Chiyu? The shamans were shocked. The shaman elder roared in shock. All the shamans who saw this scene could not believe their eyes. The demon god of the shaman tribe, Chiyu, was injured by Yi Xian's halberd. On the other side, the members of the celestial court cheered and shouted Yi Xian's name. There were even yellow-scarved strong men beating the war drums. In an instant, their morale was boosted. Retreat! Chiyu's shoulder blade was pierced through by the heaven-destroying halberd. His face was gloomy as he retreated thousands of miles away. He even kept a safe distance from Yi Xian. Extremely heavy breathing could be heard coming out of Chiyu's mouth and nose. A horrible bloody hole appeared on his shoulder, from which a large amount of blood gushed out and dyed his burly body red. What is this halberd? With the Chiyu demonic saber in his hand, he was staring at the heaven-destroying halberd in Yi Xian's hand. A loud rumbling sound came from his mouth. Obviously, in the clash of weapons, the demonic saber in his hand was no match for the heaven-destroying halberd. This had already set off a storm in his heart. No one knew what Chiyu was feeling at this moment. Although the devil saber in his hand was not well known in the world, it was a world-shocking devil saber. It had killed countless ancient demons and was not inferior to those primordial spiritual treasures. The artifact had a spirit, and the owner knew it. Chiyu could feel that the demonic saber was afraid of the weapon in Yi Xian's hand. This was something that had never happened since the saber was born. It was simply beyond his imagination. Are you afraid? At this moment, Yi Xian pointed the heaven-punishing halberd at Chiyu from afar. The corners of his mouth curled into a contemptuous smile, causing Chiyu to be enraged. He let out a heaven-shaking roar as he charged towards Yi Xian once again. Today, you will definitely die. Rumble. The demonic saber was resplendent and the saber radiance illuminated the sky. Tongtian's demonic light was blooming to the extreme. As the demonic god of the sorcerer tribe, Chiyu would not allow himself to retreat. Even if the opponent's weapon was extremely terrifying, it was not a reason for him to retreat. Clang, clang, clang. The saber and halberd collided. Heaven and earth were upside down, the void was collapsing and the world was twisting. When the two of them fought again, not only were the saber and halberd clashing, but also the terrifying killing arts. For a moment, the battle between the two of them had reached a white-hot stage. Blood splattered across the sky and the world wailed. The heaven-destroying halberd in Yi Xian's hands exploded with boundless power. Every strike of the halberd caused Chiyu to feel unimaginable pressure. Although his physical body was stronger than Yi Xian's, his so-called physical body was completely vulnerable in the face of the #1 killing weapon of all time. Terrifying bloody holes appeared all over Chiyu's body. Large amounts of blood dyed his body red. However, under the divine skill of the sorcerer tribe, Chiyu's body quickly recovered. However, his face became increasingly pale. Obviously, the divine skill of the sorcerer tribe to recover the physical body could not be used endlessly. As he suffered more and more injuries, he would die under the heaven-destroying halberd sooner or later. Of course, in the white-hot battle between the two of them, Chiyu was at a disadvantage because of the heaven-destroying halberd and had suffered great injuries. However, this did not mean that Yi Xian had the upper hand. After all, Chiyu was an ancient sorcerer of the sorcerer tribe and a demon god of the sorcerer tribe. His cultivation was comparable to a quasi-sage who had severed two corpses. This was his true cultivation, and it was something that he had cultivated for countless years. However, Yi Xian was different. His aura gradually began to dim because the time for the tribulation transcender transformation was almost up. This also caused his combat strength to continue to decline. Although the tribulation transcender transformation was a heaven-defying technique that could raise Yi Xian's realm, one should not forget that this was only a secret technique and not Yi Xian's true cultivation. The tribulation transcender transformation only lasted for 2 hours. After 2 hours, Yi Xian would return to his original state. This was also the limit of the tribulation transcender transformation. If Yi Xian could always be in the state of the tribulation transcender transformation, then the tribulation transcender transformation would not be called a heaven-defying technique, but an invincible technique. Everything went round and round, and the world had its ups and downs. No technique was perfect, and the tribulation transcender transformation was no exception. At this moment, Yi Xian seemed to have fallen into a frenzy as he violently attacked Chiyu. This was because he could already feel that his cultivation was regressing, and the aftereffects of the tribulation transcender transformation were slowly becoming apparent. He was afraid that in less than 10 breaths of time, the blessing of the tribulation transcender transformation would completely dissipate. Therefore, when Yi Xian's tribulation transcender transformation completely disappeared, not to mention killing Chiyu, he had to severely injure him to the point of death. Otherwise, when the blessing of the tribulation transcender transformation dissipated, he would definitely fall into a predicament. Chiyu awkwardly avoided the sharp edge of the punishing heaven halberd, and the demonic saber in his hand slashed at Yi Xian from time to time. As an ancient sorcerer of the sorcerer tribe, Chiyu was not stupid. He could already feel that Yi Xian's cultivation was regressing, which made him happy. He did not want to fight Yi Xian head-on. Die. Suddenly, Yi Xian cruelly roared, and the punishing heaven halberd rumbled. Boundless darkness covered the sky, and the punishing heaven halberd smashed down towards Chiyu. Obviously, this was Yi Xian's strongest attack. He wanted to suppress Chiyu before the tribulation transcender transformation completely disappeared. Die. Facing Yi Xian's world-destroying attack, Chiyu's complexion changed greatly. This was because Yi Xian's attack had already locked onto him, and he could not avoid it at all. He could only slash at Yi Xian with his saber, hoping to force Yi Xian to retreat. But then, something terrible happened. Yi Xian's halberd smashed down towards Chiyu, and the demonic saber in Chiyu's hand also attacked him. However, under Chiyu's horrified gaze, Yi Xian did not dodge at all. He directly ignored his saber and continued to bombard him. Chapter 675. Blood splattered everywhere, and it was extremely tragic. One of Yi Xian's arms was cut off by the demonic saber, and blood splattered all over the sky. However, the heaven-punishing halberd also smashed into Chiyu's body at this moment, causing half of his body to explode without a trace. Celestial Emperor! Ancient Shaman! Shocked cries came from all directions. No one had expected such an outcome. Buzz! The blessing of the tribulation transcender transformation finally dissipated. Yi Xian's flushed face turned pale, and he spat out a mouthful of blood essence. He held the arm that was cut off by the demonic saber in his hand and then directly put it back on his arm. As a terrifying mist surrounded his arm was restored to its original state. However, the aura around Yi Xian's body had become extremely weak. Bang! At the same time, Qiyu suffered Yi Xian's peerless attack. Half of his body had been annihilated, and his entire body slammed into the peak of the ancestral shaman mountain. A human-shaped pit also appeared. "Protect the ancient shaman," old shaman roared with a trembling voice. Hundreds of great shamans shot over and stood on the peak of the ancestral shaman mountain. They looked at Yi Xian in the sky with heavy expressions. However, an extremely oppressive atmosphere grew between heaven and earth. "Back off." Suddenly, a low roar of anger was heard. The human-shaped pit shook violently. Qiyu only had half of his body left, but he was slowly standing up. This made the sorcerer tribesmen ecstatic, and they all looked towards Qiyu. Rumble. Shaman light was the Tong Tian. The world buzzed, and a total of 12 Tong Tian shaman lights gathered from all directions at the peak of the ancestral shaman mountain. The wind and clouds rumbled and rolled, covering Qiyu's broken body. Something terrible happened. Under the cover of the 12 Tong Tian shaman lights, Qiyu's flesh and blood grew, and an extremely terrifying aura burst out. When the 12 Tong Tian shaman lights slowly dissipated, Qiyu appeared intact. "Yi Xian, I have to say that you are indeed a peerless figure. If it were any other place, I would have died at your hands. Unfortunately, you shouldn't have come to the ancestral land of the shamans. This is also the way to your death." Rumble. Qiyu stepped into the sky and was walking toward Yi Xian. The Tong Tian shaman lights around him penetrated the ground, and the demonic saber in his hand made clanging sounds. The world of the sorcerer tribe was built by the 12 ancient sorcerers. It was supported by the will of the ancient sorcerers and protected by their power. It was the pure land of the sorcerer tribe and the holy land of the sorcerer tribe. Qiyu. He slowly raised the demonic saber and pointed it at Yi Xian. He looked at Yi Xian as if he was looking at a dead man. "If we weren't enemies, I would be willing to be friends with you because you are the second person I truly admire. Unfortunately, you killed tens of thousands of my shaman clan members, destroyed the ancestral shaman temple, and almost caused this shaman's body to explode. Today, you can only die to atone for your sins." Qiyu no longer had a ferocious expression on his face. He calmly spoke because Yi Xian was destined to die today. "Celestial Emperor, leave quickly." The celestial court. Many people roared, but everyone's eyes were filled with despair. They could see that Yi Xian's cultivation had fallen greatly and he was no match for Qiyu. At this moment, Yi Xian stood in the sky with his halberd in hand. His eyes calmly looked at Qiyu, and a strange smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "Do you think you can kill me?" Yi Xian said calmly. Qiyu was slightly stunned when he heard Yi Xian's words. His gaze towards Yi Xian revealed a trace of bewilderment, and an extremely bad premonition arose from the bottom of his heart. "Do you think you can survive?" Qiyu said coldly. "I don't know if my brother can survive, but you, old son, are here. You can try." Suddenly, a ferocious and unruly voice echoed in all directions. A demonic light appeared beside Yi Xian, and as the demonic light gradually dissipated, Sun Wukong was seen wearing black armor and holding an iron rod in his hand as he coldly looked at Qiyu. "Elder brother." Yi Xian smiled. "A worthy younger brother, you are really bold. You dare to bring the celestial court to the sorcerer tribe. Even old Sun did not have your courage back then." Sun Wukong laughed arrogantly and patted Yi Xian's shoulder. However, he still looked coldly at Qiyu and pointed his iron rod at him. "For you." Sun Wukong's appearance made Qiyu's expression change. Although he could feel that Sun Wukong's cultivation was not strong, Sun Wukong gave him a strong sense of threat. "The great sage, heaven's equal." Sun Wukong swung his iron rod as if he was swinging the universe. When his voice rang out, it made the world shake violently as if it was about to collapse. "The great sage, heaven's equal?" Qiyu was surprised. He had never heard of this name and did not know who Sun Wukong was. After the Great Witch Demon Tribulation, he had been sleeping in the world of the sorcerer tribe. Sun Wukong was a descendant, so he naturally did not know him. However, Qiyu could feel that the monkey in front of him gave him a strong sense of threat. It was an indescribable feeling, but it really existed in his heart. After 3 breaths, Qiyu narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "No matter who you are, I hope you will not meddle in the affairs of the sorcerer tribe." Legend has it that demon god Qiyu is powerful. I wonder if you can defeat the iron rod in Old Sun's hand? Sun Wukong laughed wildly. He had an unruly and lawless aura. He looked at Qiyu with a fiery gaze. "Do you want to die?" Qiyu said eerily after being provoked by Sun Wukong. "Come, let Old Sun see how you, the demon god of the sorcerer tribe, can kill Old Sun." Sun Wukong was wearing black armor. Tongtian's demonic light exploded in the sky, and there was even the light of immortals and Buddhas rippling out. The iron rod in his hand buzzed and exploded, and an extremely terrifying battle aura erupted. "Brother, Old Sun has a technique called the Battle Saint Technique. Today I will let you see it. If you are interested, you can learn it." Sun Wukong laughed arrogantly, and his golden eyes suddenly brightened. When he shook his body, his golden hair stood on end, and a terrifying battle aura rumbled and surged. "Take this." The iron rod shook the sky, and the battle aura suppressed the past and the present. The iron rod in Sun Wukong's hand suddenly expanded until it was 100,000 miles long. It was like a pillar that supported the sky, and with the battle aura, it smashed violently towards Qiyu. "How dare you!" Qiyu's demonic saber in his hand set off thousands of saber rays and slashed towards Sun Wukong violently. The two of them were completely engaged in battle. Chapter 676. How dare you! With the Qiyu demonic saber in his hand, thousands of saber radiances slashed towards Sun Wukong violently, causing the two of them to engage in a fierce battle. Clang, 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 clang. Sun Wukong's transcendence whirled and iron cudgels swept across the sky. Although Sun Wukong had destroyed his 3 corpses to become a saint, his cultivation was too terrifying and could not be compared to an ordinary person. The Battle Saint technique was an extremely terrifying and heaven-defying technique. It directly caused Sun Wukong and Qiyu to be locked in a fierce battle. Even though Qiyu was an ancient demon god, he could not suppress Sun Wukong. The firmament shook and the void collapsed. Spatial cracks appeared in the boundless heaven and earth. This was caused by the fierce battle between the two of them. The terrifying aftermath of the fierce battle caused the heaven and earth to turn into a vacuum. At this moment, Yi Xian looked directly at the battle. A fiery look flashed across his eyes. Although he did not know what the Battle Saint technique that Sun Wukong had mentioned was, at this moment, Sun Wukong's combat strength was rising steadily. It was simply unimaginably fierce. After the creation of heaven and earth, all things were born. Over the endless years, there was no lack of earth-shattering figures in this world. They were the favorites of an era, and even more so, they were people who dominated the world. Yi Xian asked himself. He had only seen 2 amazing people in his life. The first was Liu Bai from the mortal world. During the Dharma ending period, he was able to create the inverse immortal formation. This was a peerless formation that could even trap immortals. The second was Sun Wukong. Regardless of his cultivation or combat strength, he was amazing. He was comparable to the people of the untainted land and was not at a disadvantage at all. Battle Saint technique, what a powerful secret technique. Yi Xian nodded slowly and praised from the bottom of his heart. The firmament shook and the clouds exploded. The battle between the two of them was too fierce. It was not inferior to the battle between Qiyu and Yi Xian. After all, Qiyu was an ancient demon god. Although Sun Wukong's combat strength was indeed heaven-defying, it did not make Qiyu retreat at all. "Heaven Emperor, it's time to retreat." Shin Gongbao bowed, his eyes heavy. Obviously, the Celestial Court had paid a heavy price to exterminate tens of thousands of sorcerer tribesmen. Yi Xian had also destroyed the ancestral sorcerer temple with his own hands. This was already a heavy blow to the sorcerer tribe. If this continued, the Celestial Court would be completely destroyed. Hearing Shin Gongbao's persuasion, how could Yi Xian not know what he was thinking? However, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes, with a trace of gloominess flashing across his eyes. Then, he slowly shook his head and directly rejected Shin Gongbao's proposal. "Heavenly Emperor, now that the great sage is here to fend off Qiyu, we should know when to stop. Before Shen Gongbao could finish, Yi Xian waved his hand and interrupted, "I have my own decision. You don't have to say anything." Sighed. Shen Gongbao sighed in his heart and could only leave. He knew that he could not change Yi Xian's decision, which also made him worried. He did not know how to end this attack on the Wu tribe. How could Yi Xian not know what Shen Gongbao was thinking? In fact, after killing tens of thousands of sorcerer tribesmen and destroying the ancestral sorcerer temple, Yi Xian also knew that he should stop while he was ahead. Leaving the ancestral land of the sorcerer tribe with the troops of the celestial court was a perfect ending. However, Yi Xian did not want to accept this perfect ending, because Di was not dead yet. He had to end this person with his own hands. This was also one of the reasons why he attacked the ancestral land of the sorcerer tribe. The most important reason was that he had obtained half of the small tripod in the ancestral sorcerer temple. Yi Xian had a strong guess that the other half of the tripod was most likely in the sorcerer tribe. How could he just leave like this? The mysterious small tripod was extremely important to Yi Xian. It was more related to the bronze Immortal Sutra in his hands, and more importantly, to his future cultivation. It was impossible for Yi Xian to give up. Yi Xian had a premonition that if he really left like this, he was afraid that he would regret it for the rest of his life. Therefore, he could not leave until he found the other half of the small tripod. The sky shook, and the place was filled with light. The exploding light was extremely dazzling, and it was accompanied by a loud rumbling sound. The battle between Qi Yu and Sun Wukong became more and more intense. Cultivating 3 techniques at the same time, fighting heaven and earth. These simple words explain Sun Wukong's current state. Immortal, Buddha, and Demon were the 3 great techniques, and Sun Wukong was proficient in all of them. When these 3 famous techniques were combined into one, Sun Wukong's battle strength was simply terrifying beyond imagination. He was also supported by the Battle Saint technique, and was locked in battle with Qi Yu. The sky was pierced through, and space was collapsing. The battle between the 2 of them was too dazzling. Neither of them could suppress the other, and it gradually entered a white-hot stage. It would probably take a long time to determine the victor. At this moment, Yi Xian silently watched the battle, and a deep look flashed across his eyes. However, he did not join the battle, and it was even more impossible for him to join forces with Sun Wukong to kill Qi Yu. It was not that Yi Xian was soft-hearted, and he did not think that he was a gentleman. It was just that Sun Wukong had his own pride. Now that the 2 of them were fighting fairly, if he really interfered, it would be an insult to Sun Wukong. Moreover, the aftereffects of his Calamity Transcender transformation had already appeared, and he was already in a weak state. Even if he joined the battle, he would not be able to play much of a role. At this moment, Yi Xian frowned. He was constantly thinking about how to deal with Qi Yu. If this continued to be delayed and another ancient shaman appeared, not to mention the Celestial Court's troops, even Sun Wukong would suffer a great calamity. This was not the result that he wanted to see. Suddenly, a green light grew between heaven and earth, and an illusory figure walked over from the horizon. It even faintly made the world stagnate, and an unimaginable aura filled the boundless sky. Boundless heaven and earth borrow the power of the universe. Eternity was boundless, and heaven and earth were long. A green light that was tens of thousands of feet long fell toward the 2 people who were fighting fiercely, and an extremely terrifying aura bloomed between heaven and earth. Bang! There was a sky-high explosion, and light and shadow intertwined. Qi Yu and Sun Wukong were completely separated from each other after colliding with each other. They even dodged the green light and looked at the person who had come. At this moment, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and looked directly at the person who had come. A heavy look rose from the bottom of his eyes. "Fellow Taoists, your hostility is too strong. Why don't you stop for the time being and listen to this humble Taoist?" When the light gradually dissipated, a Taoist in green appeared. This person had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He was dressed in Taoist attire, and he was dragging a green gourd in his hand. He gave off an extremely mysterious feeling. "Lu, the Taoist." Suddenly, Qi Yu said the name of the person who had come. If one listened carefully, they would find that there was a trace of tremor in Qi Yu's voice, which also proved how agitated his heart was. "Landya?" Yi Xian frowned and kept looking at the Taoist in green. When he saw the green gourd in the Taoist's hand, a hint of surprise appeared in his eyes. Buzz. Sun Wukong quietly returned to Yi Xian's side. He looked at Landia with surprise and bewilderment. Chapter 677. Brother, I once heard Patriarch Subhuti say that this Taoist Lu Ya's cultivation is extremely terrifying and he has an extremely great background. You and I must be careful. Sun Wukong secretly transmitted his voice. Hearing Sun Wukong's words, Yi Xian nodded secretly. Without Sun Wukong's words, he also knew that Landia was not to be trifled with. He was an extremely terrifying existence among the sages-to-be. Landia. No one knew where the sage-to-be of the untainted age came from, and no one knew where he came from. However, he had existed since the beginning of the world, and the most terrifying thing about him was the gourd in his hand. The gourd's origin was mysterious and extremely terrifying. Even the sages-to-be was extremely afraid of it. It even had a name that shocked the three realms. Immortal Flying Knife. The simple words were filled with extreme terror. Look at how arrogant and ferocious Qiyu was. However, when Lu Ya appeared, the witchcraft light around him rumbled and surged. He had long defended himself tightly. He was afraid of the immortal slaying flying saber in Lu Ya's hand. It could cut off a person's head and destroy his primordial spirit. Anyone whose head was cut off by the immortal flying knife could not be reborn and would definitely die. Although Qiyu was a member of the Wu tribe and the Wu tribe did not have primordial spirits, their bodies were no different from primordial spirits. Qiyu's body was extremely terrifying, but he did not dare to take the immortal flying knife head-on. If his head was really cut off, he would really die tragically on the spot. Moreover, the immortal flying knife was only one of the reasons. The real reason that Qiyu was afraid of was that Landia's identity was mysterious. It was suspected that he was not from the three realms. It was very likely that he was an innate spirit born in the chaos. An innate spirit was born in the chaos. It was said that when God Pangu created the world, 3,000 demon gods came to stop him. God Pangu killed all the 3,000 demon gods in anger and then created the world. That was how the untainted land appeared. The 3,000 demon gods were innate spirits. God Pangu was also an innate spirit. Ancestor Hongjun was also an innate spirit. Landia's identity was mysterious. It was very likely that he was born in the chaos. First, there was Hongjun and then there was Tian. Taoist Landia was still in front. This was a saying that had been circulating among the quasi-sages. From this, it could be seen that Landia's background was extremely mysterious. Even among the quasi-sages, no one was willing to provoke him. Landia, this is a matter between the sorcerer tribe and the celestial court. May I know why you came to the ancestral land of the sorcerer tribe? Qiyu narrowed his eyes and spoke in a low voice. He was also testing Landia. Grand Immortal Zhenyuan is a close friend of mine. When he heard that Yi Tiandi was being bullied by the sorcerer tribe, he specially invited me to come and help Yi Tiandi, Taoist Landia said with a smile and nodded at Yi Xian kindly. Do? The thing that worried Qiyu the most appeared. Qiyu held his saber in his hand and stared fiercely at Landia. However, an extremely serious look flashed across his eyes. Sun Wukong alone was already difficult for him. At this moment, there was an even more terrifying Taoist Landia. This was a disaster that the sorcerer tribe could not imagine. How could Qiyu not feel panic in his heart? Yes, Qiyu was indeed very strong. He was an ancient sorcerer of the sorcerer tribe and was also known as the ancient demon god. However, this demon god also depended on who he was facing. At this moment, Yi Xian and Sun Wukong were eyeing him covetously. There was also Taoist Landia watching from the side. How could he help the sorcerer tribe survive this disaster alone? What should he do? An extremely difficult problem was placed in front of Qiyu, causing him to be unable to advance or retreat. If he chose to directly fight with Lu Ya, it was hard to say if he would be able to defeat Lu Ya, not to mention that there was still Sun Wukong, who was on par with him in terms of battle prowess. Yi Xian's methods were even more cruel and ruthless, so he definitely wouldn't let the witch clan off so easily. Damn it! Qiyu roared anxiously in his heart. He was extremely fierce, but he was not a reckless man. He knew that if he did not handle it well today, the sorcerer tribe would definitely suffer an unimaginable blow. At this moment, Qiyu was extremely regretful. If he had known that Yi Xian was so ruthless, he would definitely have sent a message to the other ancient sorcerers to return to the sorcerer tribe. He would not have been in such a dilemma. If the other ancient sorcerers were here, Yi Xian would definitely die today. However, there was no medicine for regret in the world. Even if Qiyu was extremely regretful, it was useless. Fellow Taoist, please calm down. I don't want to be enemies with the sorcerer tribe. The Celestial Court doesn't want to be enemies with the sorcerer tribe either. Why don't we sit down and have a talk and bury the hatchet? Taoist Luya smiled, then turned to look at Yi Xian. I wonder what Heavenly Emperor Yi thinks of this humble Taoist suggestion? Since fellow Landya has come forward, I must give you face. Yi Xian nodded slowly, but a strange look flashed across his eyes. All right, since fellow Landya is willing to mediate, the sorcerer tribe is willing to give you face. Qiyu put away the demonic saber and sighed quietly. If they continued to fight, with Taoist Landya on Yi Xian's side, he would definitely lose. It was even very likely that he would die. This was definitely not the outcome he wanted to see. On this day, the ancestral sorcerer mountain finally calmed down. A pavilion appeared on the ancestral sorcerer mountain. The four of them sat down in the pavilion. There was no longer any murderous aura, but the atmosphere had become strange and heavy. In the pavilion, there was a stone table and 4 stone stools. Other than that, there was nothing else. I already know about the enmity between the sorcerer tribe and the Celestial Court. It started because Dai killed many immortals of the Celestial Court. Today, Yi Tiandi also killed tens of thousands of people of the sorcerer tribe and destroyed the ancestral sorcerer temple. Am I right? Landya said gently. I don't want to talk too much nonsense. Today, Yi Xian killed tens of thousands of people of the sorcerer tribe and destroyed the ancestral sorcerer temple with his own hands. This is enough to offset what Dai did. From now on, the Celestial Court and the sorcerer tribe do not owe each other anything. Yi Tiandi, please lead the Celestial Court and leave the ancestral land of the sorcerer tribe. Qiyu said in a neither servile nor overbearing tone. If it was in the past, Qiyu would definitely not let Yi Xian go. However, the situation now was beyond his control. He could only let Yi Xian leave first so that the sorcerer tribe could avoid this disaster. In the future, he would find Yi Xian to settle today's grudge. Ha! Suddenly, a cold laugh came from Sun Wukong. Do you really think we are 3-year-old children? You want us to leave with just a few words? Sun Wukong said coldly. Then what do you want? Qiyu's expression was as gloomy as water. If Luya wasn't by his side, he would have definitely slashed at Sun Wukong and Yi Xian. How could he possibly feign civility with Yi Xian and Yi Xian? Fellow Taoist Qiyu, please don't be angry. Actually, I did such a crazy thing in a moment of anger. I apologize to fellow Taoist Qiyu. Suddenly, under the dumbfounded gazes of Sun Wukong and Taoist Luya, Yi Xian actually cupped his hands towards Qiyu. His face carried an extremely sincere expression of apology. Silence, silence, a deathly silence. Sun Wukong and Landya were not the only ones who were speechless. Even Qiyu, the demon god of the sorcerer tribe, felt like he was in a dream. He could not believe his ears and eyes. Chapter 678. What did he see? Yi Xian was sincerely apologizing to him? Just now, Yi Xian looked as if he would not stop until he was dead. He even cut half of Qiyu's body into pieces extremely ruthlessly. In the blink of an eye, he looked guilty and apologetic. How could Qiyu react to such a great change? Qiyu was not the only one who was speechless. Even the members of the Celestial Court who were watching from afar were dumbfounded. No one knew Yi Xian's temperament better than them. It was a miracle that Yi Xian could take them out of the Wu tribe safely, let alone apologize to Qiyu in person. In the hearts of the members of the Celestial Court, what kind of person was Yi Xian? He was cruel and vicious, decisive in killing, and would do anything to achieve his goal. He was also an extremely fierce person who believed in killing and leaving no one alive. But what did the members of the celestial court see today? Yi Xian was apologizing to Qiyu. This was simply a fantasy. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would not have believed that such a thing would really happen. Yi Xian, what do you mean? Only after a full 10 breaths did Qiyu come back to his senses and examine Yi Xian with a bewildered expression. Alas! Yi Xian sighed softly and said, in fact, the celestial court and the Wu tribe have no enmity. Although Yi killed the members of the celestial court first, it was only a personal matter between the celestial court and him. It was wrong for me to vent my anger on the Wu tribe. Here, I sincerely ask for your forgiveness. Looking at Yi Xian's sincere face, Qiyu only felt extremely strange and became more cautious. He did not know what Yi Xian was playing. The Wu tribe is the authentic lineage of Pangu, and the 12 ancestors of sorcery in ancient times were formed by the essence and blood of the great god Pangu. I have always respected the Wu tribe. Today, because of my anger, I killed tens of thousands of people of the Wu tribe, which makes me feel guilty. I hope you can let me apologize to the 12 ancestors of sorcery in person, so that I can feel a little relieved. Yi Xian spoke frankly with assurance and showed an extremely ashamed expression. His voice was full of emotion and sincere words, and it was not an act. It was as if he really felt great regret for killing tens of thousands of people of the Wu tribe. As the saying goes, flattery always works. Moreover, Yi Xian's identity. Although Qi knew that Yi Xian was not as simple as he appeared on the surface, he could not see his purpose. Purpose. The ancestors of sorcerers are sleeping in the chaos and are not in the ancestral land of the sorcerer tribe. Fellow Yi, you don't have to apologize. You should take your heavenly court troops and leave the sorcerer tribe, Qiyu said with a deep look in his eyes. Obviously, no matter what purpose Yi Xian had, as long as Yi Xian was sent away quickly, the Wu tribe would be able to avoid a disaster. When he called back the other ancient sorcerers, even if Yi Xian had a great trick, the Wu tribe would not be afraid. My friend, you're wrong. Although the 12 ancestors of sorcery are not here, I still have to apologize to them for destroying the ancestral sorcery temple. I hope you can let me go to the other ancestral sorcery temples and apologize to each ancestral sorcery statue one by one, Yi Xian said sincerely. Impossible. Qiyu flatly refused and looked at Yi Xian with a gloomy look. The ancestral sorcery temple was the holy land of the Wu tribe and was divided into 12 temples. Today, Yi Xian had already destroyed one ancestral sorcery temple. If he went crazy again and destroyed the other ancestral sorcery temples, how could he explain it to the Wu tribe? Fellow Taoist, are you not giving this emperor face? Suddenly, Yi Xian's sincere face was no longer there. His whole person became gloomy and a touch of hostility surrounded him, as if he was extremely angry because of Qiyu's refusal. Bang! Sun Wukong's iron staff suddenly slammed into the ground and there was a loud bang. Although he did not know what Yi Xian's purpose was, he could see that Yi Xian must have his own ideas. This also made him release a fierce demon aura and look like he was going to attack if there was any disagreement. My friend Qiyu, since Yi Tiandi sincerely apologizes to the Wu tribe, you should follow his wish. Do you really want to see the celestial court and the Wu tribe go to war? Taoist Lanya frowned and said, This? Qiyu's face was gloomy and hesitant. He was very sure that Yi Xian must have an unknown purpose and it must have a great relationship with the ancestral sorcery temple. However, the situation was more powerful than the person. He was now at a disadvantage. If he really rejected Yi Xian, there would definitely be a big battle. This was not the result he wanted to see. Taking a step back, the ancestral sorcery temple did not have anything valuable. It was just a place of faith in the Wu tribe. As long as Yi Xian did not destroy the temple, it was fine to let him in. Okay, I can promise you, but you have to promise that after entering the ancestral sorcery temple, you will leave with your celestial court and you will not destroy the ancestral sorcery temple. Qiyu finally made a decision and looked at Yi Xian solemnly. My friend, you can rest assured that after paying respects to the ancestral sorcery temple, I will definitely leave and will not do anything rash. Yi Xian cupped his hands and bowed, but there was a strange look of excitement in his eyes. Okay, I will personally lead the way for you. I hope you will keep your promise. A black cloud rose under Chiyu's feet and he was the first to shoot into the distance. Obviously, Chiyu was still worried about Yi Xian. He was afraid that Yi Xian would cause trouble in the ancestral sorcery temple. He could only accompany Yi Xian until he left with the celestial court. "Brother, I will go with you," Sun Wukong said. "The ancestral sorcery temple is indeed magical. I can also accompany you." Taoist Luya lightly smiled, but a trace of bewilderment flashed through his eyes. It was obvious that he didn't know what Yi Xian was planning to do. Yi Xian nodded. He was not afraid that Landia would follow him. After all, the aura of that half of the small cauldron was not obvious, as if it was an ordinary item. Yi Xian could only guess that the other half of the small cauldron might be in the other ancestral sorcery temples. He was not sure if he could really find it. "Wait here for my return. If there are any sorcerer tribesmen who cause trouble, you can decide for yourselves." Yi Xian looked back at the sky-swallowing toad and the others. The meaning in his words was self-evident. Obviously, if the sorcerer tribesmen were to cause trouble, there was no need to show mercy and they could fight the sorcerer tribesmen again. "Yes, Emperor of Heaven." The celestial court troops bowed. Auspicious clouds rose into the sky and the void rippled. Yi Xian and the other two walked together and disappeared from the pavilion in an instant. When Landia appeared, he made his attitude clear. Yi Xian had already made his decision. The sorcerer tribesmen could not be destroyed. Yi Xian understood this very well. However, he also used the threat of Landia to force Chiyu to let him enter the other ancestral sorcery temples. This was his main goal. The other half of the small cauldron was too important to him. Yi Xian could not let go of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Fortunately, Chiyu was forced to agree under threat. This made Yi Xian's heart tremble. He kept praying in his heart that he could find the other half of the small cauldron in the other ancestral sorcery temples. Chapter 679. The land of the sorcerer tribe was vast, and there were a total of 12 ancestral sorcerer mountains. Each ancestral sorcerer mountain had an ancestral sorcerer temple, where the statues of the 12 ancestral sorcerers were enshrined. The ancestral sorcerer temple was not only the holy land of the sorcerer tribe, but it was also their belief in the 12 ancient sorcerers. Other than the worship that was held once every 10,000 years, no one was allowed to enter the ancestral sorcerer temple. However, today, the ancestral sorcerer temple welcomed an outsider. No, not just an outsider, but a great enemy. This person was Yi Xian. Under the hostile gazes of the sorcerer tribe, Yi Xian strolled into the ancestral sorcerer temple. The 12 ancient witches Dijiang, like a yellow sack, red like a pill fire, 6 legs and 4 wings, with no face, the ancestor of space speed. Gameng, green as bamboo, with the body of a bird and the face of a human, riding 2 dragons, the ancestor of the wood of the east. Zhurong, the head of a beast and the body of a human, covered in red scales, with fire snakes pierced through his ears and fire dragons under his feet. He was the fire ancestral shaman of the south. Rushu, the face of a human, the body of a tiger, covered in golden scales, a pair of wings on his shoulder blades, a snake pierced through his left ear, and 2 dragons under his feet, the western gold ancestral shaman. Gong Gong, the ancestor of water of the north, had the head of a python and the body of a human. He was covered in black scales, stood on a black dragon, and had a green python coiled around his hand. Xianming, it is a ferocious beast with bone spikes all over its body. It is the ancestor of rain. Hudu, she has a human body and a snake tail. She has 7 hands on her back and 2 hands on her chest. She holds a flying snake with both hands. She is the ancestral sorcerer of the Central Earth. Chang Liang, snake in mouth, snake in hand, tiger head, human body, 4 hooves, long elbows, ancestor of lightning. Candle Dragon, the head of a human and the body of a dragon. Its entire body is crimson red and it is the ancestor of time. Heavenly Wu, 8 heads, human face, tiger body, 10 tails, wind ancestor. ZZZ, human face, bird body, green snake hanging from ear, red snake in hand, ancestor of lightning. Shebi corpse, human face, beast body, ears like a dog, green snake hanging from his ears, ancestral shaman of the weather. The 12 ancestors of sorcery had strange shapes. Usually, they were in human form. Only when they were in battle would they reveal their true forms. This was also their strongest state. At this moment, under the guidance of Qiyu, Yi Xian entered the Zhu Rong temple, where the statue of Zhu Rong was also enshrined. Different from the statue of Candle Dragon, this Zhu Rong temple was made from fire-red crystals. Once Yi Xian entered this place, he immediately sensed a violent sense of power growing inside the Zhu Rong temple. Yi Xian didn't sense the violent power vibration coming from the Zhu Rong temple at all. Instead, he looked at the entire Zhu Rong temple with his pair of deep eyes, as if he was looking for something. As for the so-called apology to the statue of the ancestor of Magi, it was nothing but a formality, and didn't seem to be sincere at all. At this moment, Qiyu's expression was calm and his eyes were slightly gloomy. He was certain that Yi Xian was looking for something, but he could not understand. There were no treasures in the 12 ancestral sorcerer temples, so what was Yi Xian looking for? Qiyu wasn't the only one who had this question. Sun Wukong and Landia also had the same question. However, the three of them couldn't ask, so they could only accompany Yi Xian in silence and see what he was going to do. After 2 hours, Yi Xian finally walked out of the Zhu Rong temple. However, there was a trace of disappointment in his eyes. Obviously, he didn't find the half-cauldron in the Zhu Rong temple. Rumble. The 4 of them left the Zhu Rong temple and continued to the next ancestral sorcerer temple. Go Mang Temple, 3 days of grass and wood. Yi Xian stayed here for half a day, but still found nothing. Rusha Temple, Gonggong Temple, Xianming Temple. After a full 7 days and 7 nights, Yi Xian had stepped foot into the 5 great temples. However, the disappointment in his eyes grew heavier and heavier because there was no trace of the small cauldron in the 5 great temples. The sun shone down, and the sky was clear. An ancestral sorcerer temple was extremely illusory, and there was even a rumbling sound of chanting. The void in all directions was slightly distorted, like a dream bubble, giving people an extremely unreal feeling. In front of us is the Dijiang Temple, which is also the space ancestral sorcerer of our sorcerer tribe. Compared to other ancestral sorcerer temples, Dijiang Ancestral Sorcerer is involved in the power of space, and is also a figure of our sorcerer tribe. The 4 of them were walking slowly in the sky. Qiyu was speaking in a deep voice, but his eyes were filled with reverence when he looked at the Dijiang Temple. Obviously, Qiyu had great respect for Dijiang Ancestral Sorcerer. Dijiang? Space Ancestral Sorcerer? Hearing Qiyu's words, Yi Xian murmured softly. His eyes lit up slightly, and the disappointment in his eyes gradually recovered. He got the half-cauldron in the Candle Dragon's temple. According to Yi Xian's knowledge, the Candle Dragon and Dijiang were extremely powerful figures among the 12 ancestral sorcerers of the ancient times. Moreover, because they mastered the power of time and space, they could be said to be as close as brothers. The other half of the cauldron was very likely in the Dijiang temple. Thinking of this, Yi Xian's eyes showed a touch of passion, which also made him speed up his pace toward the Dijiang temple. Dijiang temple. There were ripples in the void, and the door of the Dijiang temple was opening. However, the space in this world was extremely unstable and showed signs of cracks from time to time. However, it also contained an extremely mysterious power of space, which allowed the Dijiang temple to stand safely on the peak of the ancestral sorcerer mountain. Without any hesitation or fear, Yi Xian strode into the Dijiang temple. This also made Qiyu frown slightly, but he did not say anything. He quickly followed Yi Xian into the Dijiang temple. The white jade altar, 3 animals and 4 fruits, the majestic statue of Dijiang, and the weak power of space were growing in the Dijiang temple. This was the scene that Yi Xian saw at the moment. The white jade altar was simple and unadorned, and the majestic statue of Dijiang was awe-inspiring. The entire Dijiang temple was empty, and everything in the temple could be seen at a glance. This also made Yi Xian squint his eyes, constantly looking for the other small cauldron. After a full 2 hours, Yi Xian withdrew his gaze, and disappointment appeared in his eyes again. There was no trace of the small cauldron in the entire Dijiang temple. It seemed that this trip to the Dijiang temple was in vain again. However, Yi Xian was somewhat unwilling to give up. He had already entered 6 ancestral sorcerer temples in a row, but he did not find any trace of the small cauldron. This already made him faintly disappointed. Just as Yi Xian was about to leave the Dijiang temple, his eyes slightly swept over the statue of Dijiang. He was suddenly stunned, and the aura around him instantly became chaotic. "What's this?" Yi Xian roared out with his heart trembling. Ever since Yi Xian entered the Dijiang temple, he'd been searching the entire Dijiang temple, but he'd forgotten about the statue in front of him. When he saw the eyes of the Dijiang statue, he was stunned on the spot, but his heart had long since been filled with monstrous waves. The eyes of the statue of Dijiang were forged from an unknown black jade. However, there was a weak, white light in the left eye. The white light was extremely weak, and it would have been impossible to discover it if he had not looked carefully. At that moment, Yi Xian clenched his fists tightly. His eyes swiveled around silently. He could see through the statue that there was half a piece of white jade in the left eye of Dijiang. Clearly, the artisans had embedded it into the statue when they forged it. Chapter 680. Found it? Yi Xian roared in his heart as he clenched his fists tightly. However, he didn't immediately make a move because this half of the cauldron was embedded in the left eye of the Dijiang statue. If he really dug it out now, Qiyu, who was beside him, would definitely stop him. "Calm down," Yi Xian warned himself to calm down. Although he tried his best to hide his abnormality, the 3 people beside him were all sage to be and were very sensitive to auras. How could they not sense Yi Xian's abnormality at this moment? "Brother, help me stop Qiyu." Suddenly, Yi Xian secretly transmitted his voice to Sun Wukong. This made Sun Wukong slightly stunned, but he quickly came back to his senses. The Battle Saint technique was quietly activated and the iron cudgel in his hand was slightly clenched. Bang! There was a loud noise and the earth shook. Yi Xian acted without any hesitation. He stepped on the ground and the entire ancestral sorcerer temple shook. A huge crack appeared on the ground. Yi Xian's entire body was heading toward Dijiang's statue. "How dare you!" Such a scene made Qiyu's expression change. He violently slashed out with the demonic saber in his hand, but Sun Wukong was already in front of him. An extremely fierce aura bloomed and an iron cudgel came crashing down on Qiyu's head. Bang! A loud explosion sounded out as the void exploded. The terrifying force produced by the collision of the 2 men's sabers and staffs directly turned the Dijiang temple into ashes. It was also at this moment that Yi Xian smashed the Dijiang statue into pieces with his palm, and the half of the small cauldron quietly fell into his hand. However, this scene was completely seen by Landya. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the half cauldron in Yi Xian's hand. However, Yi Xian was so fast that he did not let Landya see it clearly. He had already taken the half cauldron. "You're courting death." Dijiang's temple was destroyed in an instant. This made Qiyu furious. The demonic saber in his hand exploded the void for thousands of miles. Every slash of his saber brought about thousands of sky-splitting saber radiances that enveloped Sun Wukong and Yi Xian. Clang, clang. The Sun Wukong battle sacred technique was extremely terrifying and its battle prowess was comparable to Qiyu's. On the other hand, Yi Xian had obtained half of the small cauldron and was no longer as humble as before. The heaven-destroying halberd violently struck towards Qiyu. "Fellow Taoists, please calm down. Don't hurt the harmony between us." Landya frowned slightly, and the gourd in his hand rippled out. An extremely terrifying aura bloomed, directly blocking the 2 sides, and unknowingly resolving the beginning of the battle. "Landya, I gave you face, but this Yi Xian is so ambitious that he destroyed the statue of ancestral sorcerer Dijiang. Don't you want to give me an explanation?" Qiyu roared, his face extremely red. "Explain." Yi Xian sneered. The heaven-punishing halberd rumbled as it released a killing intent that soared into the heavens. He pointed the halberd in his hand at Qiyu and said, "Do I still need to give you an explanation after killing you? Brother, although it's unfair to join forces against the enemy, I can't rest easy if I don't kill this person. Today, I can only join forces with you to kill him. Please don't take it to heart, Yi Xian said coldly. Brother, there's no need to explain. Just kill him directly, Sun Wukong replied coldly. Sun Wukong replied coldly. It was obvious that he wasn't a pedantic person. He knew that Yi Xian and the shaman clan were at odds with each other. If he still insisted on a fair battle, then when the other shamans arrived, the two of them would definitely be in danger. As for Landia, he was an extremely unstable factor. The two of them could not count on him at all. The only right choice was to kill Qi Yu and leave the sorcerer tribe. Calamity Transcender Transformation. Rumble. The Tong Tian in the fog was sublimated to the extreme. Yi Xian's combat strength was rising steadily. After 7 days of secretly swallowing elixirs, Yi Xian's injuries had already recovered by 70%. He could even barely use the Tribulation Transcender transformation once. However, this would cause even greater sequelae for him. But Yi Xian could not care so much. After all, there was no room for reconciliation between him and the sorcerer tribe. Kill. The heaven-destroying halberd was boundless, and it smashed toward Qi Yu with a dark light. Sun Wukong's battle saint technique was activated violently. An iron staff that seemed to be able to pierce through the sky also smashed toward Qi Yu at this moment. Clang, clang, clang. The iron staff flew across the sky, and the halberd suppressed the world. When Sun Wukong and Yi Xian joined forces, they directly put Qi Yu in danger. He did not even have the strength to fight back. He could only passively suffer the violent attacks of the two powerful figures. Bang! Sun Wukong's staff smashed Qi Yu's chest, and Yi Xian's halberd pierced through Qi Yu's waist. Qi Yu suffered an unimaginable injury, but he still madly slashed out with the demonic saber in his hand. The bright and sharp saber light also forced the two of them to retreat. Rumble. Without any hesitation, and without daring to stay, Qi Yu frantically fled into the distance, covered in blood. However, he was roaring loudly, and an extremely mysterious scripture came from his mouth. We can't let him go. Yi Xian roared ferociously. He took a step forward, tore through the void, and violently chased after Qi Yu. Sun Wukong followed closely behind, and a chase appeared in the sorcerer tribe's world. At this moment, Landia frowned, and his eyes flashed with uncertainty. He was not shocked because the two of them wanted to kill Qi Yu, but because he hurriedly glanced at the small cauldron that Yi Xian had obtained. The heaven-shattering cauldron? Impossible, absolutely impossible. It's impossible for the heaven-shattering void cauldron to appear in the three realms. Landia's voice trembled, and there was fear in his eyes, as if he had thought of something terrifying. Landia kept calming himself down, and it was only after dozens of breaths that he regained his composure. His eyes turned slightly, and he took a step forward to chase after the three of them. In the sorcerer tribe's world, the sky was chasing after him. Qi Yu had suffered an unimaginable calamity. Two supreme figures were ruthlessly attacking him. Although he was an ancient sorcerer of the sorcerer tribe and was known as an ancient demon god, he did not dare to fight at all when faced with the joint attack of two supreme figures. Sorcerer blood splattered into the sky, and shrill roars were endless. Qi Yu was fleeing for his life. He formed a mysterious sorcerer seal with both hands, as if he was summoning some kind of mysterious power to descend. However, he was being chased by two people, and the seals in his hands were constantly interrupted, making it impossible for him to use them. Save the ancient sorcerer. Such a huge commotion had long attracted the attention of the sorcerer tribe. Hundreds of them were rushing over. Although they knew that they were no match for Yi Xian and Sun Wukong, Qi Yu's life was too important. Even if they died in Yi Xian's hands, they had to let Qi Yu escape this death. I'll kill one if one comes. I'll kill two if two come. Yi Xian growled sinisterly. He did not show any mercy at all. He had a feud with the sorcerer tribe. Since he had found the small cauldron, he would make the sorcerer tribe pay a heavy price before he left. Bang, bang, bang. The halberd flew across the sky, and the souls of the dead wailed. Every time Yi Xian struck out with his halberd, he would take the life of a great sorcerer. Sun Wukong was also an extremely ferocious and unruly figure. The two of them did not show any mercy and directly turned the world into a blood-red slaughterhouse. Chapter 681. 12 Capital Heaven Divine Wraith Formation. Rumble. Half of the hundreds of great shamans died tragically, but it also bought Chi-Yu some time to catch his breath. This also allowed him to complete the mysterious wizard mantra in his hand. Terrifying wizard light rumbled and rose in the entire wizard world. Bang, bang, bang. The 12 ancestral shaman mountains rumbled and shook in all directions on the vast land. 12 huge trenches appeared, and 12 pitch-black banners rose from the cracked ground. An extremely terrifying aura covered the entire wizard world. 12 Capital Heaven Divine Wraith Formation. This was the strongest formation of the wizard race, and it was also a killing formation between heaven and earth. It was also one of the greatest treasures of the wizard race. There were 3 ultimate formations in heaven and earth. The heavenly cycle star formation was set up by the primordial demon court's Eastern Emperor Tai, and it had 365 primordial star gods presiding over it. Its power could destroy the heavens and the earth, and it could even topple the 3 realms. The fairy slaying sword formation. During the great god investiture tribulation, the 4 great saints worked together to break the fairy slaying sword formation. From this, one could see how terrifying this formation was. The last ultimate formation was the wizard race's 12 Capital Heaven Divine Wraith Formation. It was an extremely terrifying killing formation from ancient times. Legend had it that if the 12 ancient shamans controlled this formation, they could condense Pangu's true body. Even saints would have to retreat. It was also said to be the number 1 ultimate formation in the 3 realms. However, this legend had been around for a long time, but no one had ever seen it. The 12 Capital Heaven Divine Wraith Formation was filled with murderous aura. Although it was not controlled by the 12 ancient shamans and was only summoned by Chi-Yu, it was still extremely terrifying. The 12 black banners were filled with murderous aura, and the 12 demon god Dharma appearances appeared. The pitch-black and terrifying aura covered the sky, and the roars of ferocious demons could be heard from all directions. The 12 Capital Heaven Divine Wraith Formation? Yi Xian stood with his halberd, and his eyes instantly turned serious. Even Sun Wukong's expression changed slightly. Obviously, the number 1 ultimate formation in the 3 realms was well known. You killed my people and destroyed my temple. Even if I die, I want you to die with me. Chi-Yu roared madly and furiously. A large amount of blood seeped out from the corners of his mouth, and his face was extremely pale. Clearly, controlling the 12 divine beings' slaughtering formation by himself had caused him to suffer a great backlash. After all, the 12 divine beings' killing formation was a peerless formation. The murderous aura contained in it was too terrifying. Otherwise, it would not be known as the number 1 ultimate formation in the 3 realms. Although Chi-Yu had the cultivation base of an ancient shaman, he had no choice but to do this. Fellow Taoist, stop. Suddenly, Taoist Landia flew over on a cloud. He looked at Chi-Yu seriously, and his voice reverberated between heaven and earth. Landia, you and Yi Xian bullied my Wu tribe. When the ancestor of sorcery returns, he will definitely seek justice from you. Chi-Yu roared with hatred. His eyes were red, and he looked at Landia with hatred. You? Landia frowned, and a grave look appeared in his eyes. He had only come to the Wu tribe to help Yi Xian and let him leave safely. He did not expect things to become so serious. Landia could not afford to offend the 12 ancient shamans. Although he would not be in danger of dying, offending the Wu tribe was definitely not his intention. Pretentious? Putting on airs? Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? Suddenly, just as Landia was in a dilemma, Yi Xian slowly walked toward Chi-Yu with the heaven-destroying halberd in his hand. He looked at Chi-Yu with disdain, as if he did not take the 12 divine beings' slaughtering formation seriously at all. Brother, be careful. Sun Wukong's expression changed slightly, and he secretly reminded Yi Xian. As the 12 demon god Dharma Laksana stretched across the sky, they were releasing boundless evil spirit. If Chi-Yu really activated this formation, even Yi Xian would be in danger. It was entirely possible that he would die here. Yi Xian did not respond to Sun Wukong's reminder. Instead, a strange smile appeared on his face as he looked at Qiyu. He even hooked his finger and said, "Come, let me see the 12 divine beings slaughtering formation." As Yi Xian finished speaking, Landia suddenly looked at Yi Xian. His eyes trembled slightly, and he looked at Yi Xian as if he was looking at a madman. He said in a serious voice, "Yi Xian, are you crazy? How can you resist this formation? Do you think he dares to activate this formation?" Yi Xian smiled strangely and looked straight at Qiyu. This also made Qiyu clench his fists tightly. His face was already extremely red, and he gritted his teeth so hard that they creaked. However, there was no surprise in his eyes when he looked at Yi Xian. "It seems that I guessed right. You can't control the 12 divine beings slaughtering formation at all. If you really activate this formation, not only will you be devoured by it, the boundless evil spirit contained in this formation will also destroy the entire sorcerer world. All of you sorcerer tribesmen will die as well," Yi Xian said sinisterly. His voice was even more resolute and decisive. "Yi Xian Lilair." Qiyu shouted at Yi Xian word by word. However, his trembling body betrayed his true emotions at that moment. It was obvious that Yi Xian was right. He did not dare to activate this formation at all. Just as Yi Xian had said, he could not control the 12 divine beings slaughtering formation. If he really activated this formation, not only would he die, but all of the sorcerer tribesmen would also die in the boundless evil spirit. Of course, if the 12 divine beings slaughtering formation was really activated, Yi Xian and the others would also die tragically on the spot. This was simply an outcome of mutual destruction. However, Qiyu did not dare to do so, because the consequences of doing so would be the death of the entire sorcerer tribe along with Yi Xian. "Actually, I am a very reasonable person. As long as you hand over to Yi, I will leave with my people without another word." Yi Xian's smile disappeared as he spoke in a low voice. "Impossible." Qiyu's expression changed drastically, and he rejected sternly. The Yi was the mainstay of the sorcerer tribe. If he really handed it over to Yi Xian, Yi would definitely die. "Impossible?" Yi Xian slowly shook his head, and his eyes gradually turned cold. He said, "You have to think about it carefully. Is the entire sorcerer tribe more important, or is the Yi more important? Do you want to see the entire sorcerer tribe die with the Yi?" Everything was silent, and the world was silent. When Yi Xian finished speaking, Qiyu was stunned on the spot. His arrogant head drooped down, but his tightly clenched fists and trembling body proved that his mind was in turmoil. "All right, I promise you." After a full 10 breaths of time, Qiyu suddenly raised his head and looked at Yi Xian, but there were tears of blood in his eyes. His voice was dead silent, as if he had lost his soul. He could not afford to risk Qiyu. If he was alone, he could choose to die together with Yi Xian. However, the entire sorcerer tribe was behind him, and he could not activate the 12 divine beings slaughtering formation and let the entire sorcerer tribe die with Yi Xian. He could not afford to gamble with Qiyu, and he could see that Yi Xian was a crazy person. He was a person who would do anything to achieve his goals. At this moment, only by sacrificing the Yi could Yi Xian retreat safely and let the sorcerer tribe survive. Chapter 682. As the saying goes, a wise man submits to circumstances. Your choice is undoubtedly correct. Yi Xian smiled, giving people a feeling of spring wind and rain. The weapons stopped, and the world was silent. The 12 divine beings killing formation was removed, and Yi Xian and Sun Wukong also put away their weapons. The world was clear again, but great humiliation filled the hearts of every sorcerer. Since the beginning of the world, the sorcerer tribe had been strong and domineering. Even in the face of the ancient demon court, they were extremely fierce. But today they were bullied by Yi Xian. This was simply something that had never happened before, and it was a great humiliation to them. Every sorcerer was extremely angry, but they dared not speak out. The seed of hatred had been planted, and it would definitely blossom and bear fruit in the future. "Go and bring the Yi here." Qiyu's voice was a little tired and full of decadence. "No need, I'll come myself." Suddenly, a ray of sorcerer light bloomed, and an illusory figure came from the horizon. His body was covered by sorcerer light, and only his head was intact. Who else could it be but the Yi Xian? The peerless expert of the sorcerer tribe, had his body destroyed by Yi Xian in the battle of the celestial court, and only his head escaped back to the sorcerer tribe. But he had never thought that Yi Xian would kill the sorcerer tribe. But as a great sorcerer and a peerless expert of the sorcerer tribe, he could not escape in the face of the sorcerer tribe's life and death. From the beginning to the end, he had seen everything that had happened to the sorcerer tribe. Even ancient sorcerer Qi Yu was unable to save them. If he did not appear, this disaster would eventually bring disaster to the sorcerer tribe. Yi wasn't afraid of death, nor was he afraid of death. He knew that only by dying would the witch clan be able to survive this calamity. However, he was also very happy, because after he died, Yi Xian would also fall in the near future, because the witch clan wouldn't let him off. His body was destroyed, and his cultivation fell greatly. Even if Yi did not die today, it would take at least 10 million years to reassemble his body, and he would never be able to step into the sage-to-be. He had long seen no hope. Very good, you've appeared. Rumble. Heaven and earth were turned upside down and the stars moved. Yi Xian reached out with his palm and directly restrained Yi. He pressed his palm onto Yi's head and a cold, murderous intent flashed across his eyes. Yi Xian, come and kill me. After falling into Yi Xian's hands, Yi was not afraid at all. Instead, he laughed maniacally and looked at Yi Xian with hatred. I admire those who aren't afraid of death. Sadly, you aren't one of them. Today, I shall send you on your way, Yi Xian calmly spoke. His palms and fingers glowed as though he was about to kill Yi in the next instant. Yi Xian, don't be too complacent. You can kill me today, but don't forget that in the future, when the ancestor of sorcerers appears, all the ancient sorcerers will return and avenge me. Yi sneered and looked at Yi Xian with pity. Looking at Yi's heroic appearance, Yi Xian's lips curled into a strange smile and said, what a pity, you won't live to see that day. You can go to hell now. Yi Xian cruelly said as he slapped his palm towards Yi. This caused Yi to close his eyes and reveal an expression of relief. Suddenly, a trembling voice sounded out from afar. Two figures shot over, and it was this voice that caused Yi Xian to frown. He raised his head to look at the people who'd arrived. Two streaks of light arrived in the blink of an eye and instantly appeared in front of Yi Xian. When the light dissipated, the moon fairy and Kwa Fu also appeared in Yi Xian's eyes. Xiao Yi, do you want to save him? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and looked embarrassed. He looked straight at the goddess of Moon Palace. Yi Xian, you can't kill him. The goddess of Moon Palace bit her lips and her voice trembled. She looked at Yi Xian pleadingly. Yi Tiandi, I promise you that as long as you spare Yi's life, he will never be your enemy from now on. Kwa Fu's face was pale. He bowed to Yi Xian and no longer looked as arrogant as before. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't look at Kwa Fu at all. He looked straight at the goddess of Moon Palace and said calmly, give me a reason not to kill him. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the goddess of Moon Palace had a complicated look on her face. She didn't know how to answer Yi Xian. Her eyes were filled with tears and she was speechless. Since you can't give me a reason, he must die today. Yi Xian's voice was cold. He didn't plan to let Yi go just because the goddess of Moon Palace pleaded for him. Xiao Yi, he can kill me if he wants to. You don't have to plead for me. When the goddess of Moon Palace appeared, Yi was shouting excitedly. Obviously, his pride wouldn't allow a woman to beg for his life. Bang. Suddenly, under the dumbfounded gazes of Yi and Yi Xian, the moon fairy actually knelt down as tears rolled down from her eyes. Yi Xian, if you really want to kill him, then kill me. I'm willing to exchange my life for yours. I just beg you to spare Yi's life. The goddess of Moon Palace said through gritted teeth. Are you forcing me to do this? After a full 3 breaths of time, Yi Xian slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. His voice trembled to the extreme. Yi once saved my life. I've never forgotten that. Today, I'm willing to die for him. I just beg you to spare his life. Heaven Emperor, why don't you leave now? Shen Gongbao bowed and said, Heaven Emperor, Please spare his life for the sake of the goddess of Moon Palace. The sky-swallowing toad was the most ferocious and bloodthirsty, but he was also speaking to Yi Xian. As the two of them spoke, a large number of the Celestial Court Immortals spoke up. Obviously, the Celestial Court Immortals knew about the relationship between Yi Xian and the goddess of Moon Palace. Naturally, they had to speak up at this moment to give Yi Xian a way out. This was their way of being subjects. At this moment, Yi Xian's murderous intent dissipated. He became extremely quiet. No one knew what he was thinking. After a full 10 breaths of time, Yi Xian finally raised his head to look at the fairy Guanghan. Chung, you asked me to spare his life. Have you ever thought that if I wasn't his match, he would spare my life in the Celestial Court? Yi Xian said calmly. As Yi Xian's voice rang out, the goddess of Moon Palace was stunned. Yes, if Yi Xian wasn't a Yi's match, how could he spare Yi Xian's life? The goddess of Moon Palace couldn't refute. She didn't know how to refute. However, Di had saved her life in the past. If she let Di die tragically in front of her, she couldn't accept it. Buzz. Yi Xian flipped his palm and fingers. Divine light surged. He raised his palm again and was about to kill Di on the spot. No! The goddess of Moon Palace suddenly stood in front of Di. She looked at Yi Xian bitterly. A line of clear tears flowed out of her eyes. Do you really think I don't dare to kill you? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. His black pupils gradually turned pale. The merciless aura of the 6 desires suddenly bloomed. He looked at the goddess of Moon Palace with a gloomy, murderous intent. Chapter 683. He is my sworn brother. How can I watch him die in your hands? The Moon Fairy cried out in grief. She was already in tears. At this moment, the members of the Celestial Court were watching in silence. The sorcerer tribe was silent, the killing intent dissipated once more. In the end, Yi Xian didn't make a move. This also caused Kwa Fu to reveal a happy expression. He knew that Di had managed to survive from Yi Xian's hands. Celestial Emperor, it's time for us to go back. Xin Gongbao bowed. Yes, it's time to go back. Yi Xian nodded slowly. However, what happened next stunned everyone. It was as if they had fallen into a dream. They could not believe their eyes. Bang! With a muffled sound, light and shadow intertwined. Under everyone's stunned gaze, Yi Xian quietly appeared in front of Di. The merciless chi of the 6 desires bloomed violently. The horrible palm suddenly slapped onto Yi's head. Di screamed. However, his head was collapsing inch by inch. He had never thought that Yi Xian would attack him violently. He really ignored the goddess of Moon Palace and killed him. Die! Yi Xian let out a cruel roar as his eyes became extremely brutal. His palm spat out an enormous force as he slammed it into Yi's hand. His tyrannical voice reverberated in all directions, whoosh, whoosh. The wind blew and Di turned into ashes. Even when he was dying, he could not understand why Yi Xian suddenly killed him at the last moment when he had given up on killing him. Di was not the only one who could not understand. Even the crowd was speechless. No one knew what Yi Xian was thinking. Brother! The goddess of Moon Palace cried out in grief. Kwa Fu trembled and roared. Countless members of the sorcerer tribe were crying. But why did you have to kill him? Suddenly, the Moon Fairy looked at Yi Xian with tears in her eyes. She questioned Yi Xian loudly. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not answer the Moon Fairy's question. Instead, he looked at the Moon Fairy coldly. Remember, you belong to me in life, and you belong to me in death. You and I are already married, and your life is mine. Without my permission, you can't die for anyone. Now, follow me back to the Celestial Court. Yi Xian said coldly. No, I won't go back with you. I hate you. The fairy of the Moon Palace gritted her teeth and scolded Yi Xian loudly. She retreated with tears in her eyes and then rode a cloud into the distance. Silence, silence, a deathly silence. When Yi died tragically on the spot and the Moon Fairy flew away, the members of the Celestial Court had not recovered from their shock. They just looked at Yi Xian's back with a complicated expression. Yi Xian did not chase after the Moon Fairy. He just watched her go quietly. He was never a bootlicker, and he would never compromise for any woman. Today, Dai had to die because this was an explanation he had to give to the heavenly court. Although they seemed to be pleading for Dai, that was because they knew about the relationship between him and Fairy Guanghan. That was why this happened. However, Yi Xian knew very well that he had killed too many demon kings and immortals in the celestial court. If he let Yi go because of a woman, how could he deserve the title of celestial emperor? How could he convince the members of the celestial court? Therefore he had to die. No one could change this outcome. This was also the explanation Yi Xian gave to the dead members of the celestial court. He killed tens of thousands of people from the sorcerer tribe, destroyed the ancestral sorcerer temple, and even killed Yi when the moon fairy pleaded for mercy. These were all things he had to do. As a leader, he could not disappoint his subordinates. He had to reward those who did well and investigate those who did wrong. This was the only way to create the strongest orthodoxy. At this moment, the members of the celestial court had a subtle change in their emotions. They looked at Yi Xian with a look of awe that they had never had before. In the past, they all had their own goals. Some were for cultivation resources, some were for the revival of the Jia order. However, now, each of them felt a sense of belonging. This was a sense of belonging to Yi Xian and the celestial court. He had killed countless demon kings and immortals in the celestial court. Yi Xian had personally led them to kill the sorcerer tribe. He had even ignored the moon fairy and killed. Yi Xian had completely done an eye for an eye. How could the members of the celestial court not feel respect for what he had done? Beat the gongs and retreat, Yi Xian said in a low voice. This also caused the members of the celestial court to wake up quickly. The yellow-turbaned strongmen beat the war drums and the golden clouds that covered the sky rose into the sky. Fellow cultivator, please come to the celestial court for a gathering. Yi Xian looked back at Landia and smiled. That's what I was thinking. Landia nodded slightly and agreed. Brother, back then, you caused havoc in the celestial court. You ate the peaches of immortality and swallowed the golden elixir. This time, I'm in charge of the celestial court. You can stay in the peach garden and I'll offer you the best immortal wine and golden elixir. Brother, please come to the celestial court with me. Yi Xian smiled and invited Sun Wukong. A worthy younger brother invites me. How can I refuse? Sun Wukong laughed maniacally. The war drums of the celestial court beat and the golden clouds that covered the sky rose into the sky. Yi Xian led the members of the celestial court and finally left the sorcerer tribe's world. However, the news of his conquest of the sorcerer tribe had spread throughout the three realms and brought great shock to the three realms. Yi Xian, you brat, the sorcerer tribe will remember what you did today. You won't live for long. Qiyu held the demonic saber in his hand and roared angrily in the sorcerer tribe's world, causing the sorcerer tribe to roar with hatred. Summon the sorcerer sky token and summon the rest of the ancient sorcerers. Qiyu roared crazily. On this day, a black mottled token flew out of the sorcerer tribe's world and directly broke through the sorcerer tribe's world and appeared in the three realms. The 33rd heaven of the celestial court. Palaces rose from the ground and the sky was filled with immortal light and flowing clouds. The entire celestial court was in full swing. Countless yellow-scarved strongmen and heavenly soldiers were rebuilding the dilapidated celestial court. In the celestial emperor's palace, Yi Xian and Sun Wukong sat side by side while Landia sat to the side. The three of them were drinking and chatting with smiles on their faces. Thank you for coming to help. Otherwise, the celestial court's trip to the sorcerer tribe would not have gone so smoothly. Yi Xian raised his cup and toasted Landia. Then, he drank all the wine in his cup. You're too humble. I don't deserve your praise. Landia smiled and drank all the wine in his cup. It was also at this moment that he put down his cup and smiled at Yi Xian. He said, however, there's one thing that I don't understand. I wonder if Yi Tiandi can explain it to me. There's no harm in asking. Yi Xian smiled. In the Dijiang temple, I seem to have seen the celestial emperor obtain an item. I wonder what kind of treasure it is. Can I take a look? Landia said solemnly. Fellow Taoist, you must be mistaken. I destroyed the Dijiang temple on impulse. I never obtained any treasures. Yi Xian smiled and poured himself another cup of wine. Then he drank all the wine in one gulp. However, a hint of coldness flashed through his eyes. Obviously, the mysterious cauldron was of great importance. Yi Xian would never admit it, let alone show it to Landya. After all, Landya was extremely mysterious and the gourd in his hand was extremely terrifying. Yi Xian did not want to fail miserably. I'm a little tired. I won't see you out. Yi Xian put down his cup. Although he was smiling, he was also asking him to leave. This also made Landya's expression change slightly. He took a deep look at Yi Xian, then smiled and said, "Since the Celestial Emperor is tired, then I'll take my leave. I hope that I can reunite with you again at the Ginseng Fruit Festival 30,000 years later." After Landya finished speaking, his body suddenly became illusory. He turned into a wisp of immortal smoke and disappeared without a trace. A worthy younger brother, this Taoist Landya's cultivation is so terrifying, Sun Wukong said solemnly. First there was Hongjun, then there was Tian. Taoist Landya came first. Yi Xian murmured to himself, this Taoist Landya is too mysterious, and his attitude is unclear. We have to be careful. Chapter 684. Brother, do you have a deep friendship with Zhen Yuanzi? Otherwise, why would Landya come to help you out of respect for Zhen Yuanzi? Goku suddenly asked. Hearing Goku's words, Yi Xian slowly shook his head and said, Emperor Ziwei is on good terms with me, and Emperor Ziwei is Zhen Yuanzi's disciple. I've also seen Zhen Yuanzi several times, but we don't have much of a friendship. Brother, Zhen Yuanzi and I are sworn brothers, but we seem to be united on the surface, but we're divided at heart, just like the Bull Demon King in the past. It's just that this person is known as the ancestor of earthly immortals, and is extremely extraordinary among the sage-to-be. You have to be careful. Goku warned. Yi Xian slowly nodded. Just as Goku had said, this great immortal Zhen Yuan always gave him a mysterious feeling. Although this person seemed to be kind, he was absolutely not as simple as he appeared to be. A worthy younger brother, your skills didn't come out of thin air. Obviously you were taught by someone. I wonder who your master is? Goku solemnly asked while Yi Xian was deep in thought. Yi Xian was startled, and a wisp of caution flashed through his eyes. It should be known that asking about someone's master was an extremely taboo behavior, unless the person took the initiative to tell. However, when Yi Xian looked at Goku, he saw a dignified look in the latter's eyes, as if he had something to say to him. This also startled Yi Xian, as he knew that Goku would definitely not speak without thinking. However, when it came to master, Yi Xian didn't know where to start, because he really didn't know who Yuan Ling was. Moreover, the two of them had long been like fire and water, and there would be a life and death battle sooner or later. Brother, please don't blame me. I got my skills from the immortal scripture, but the person who taught me this method is extremely mysterious. Even I don't know his true identity. Yi Xian said bluntly. Looking at Yi Xian's self-deprecating expression, Goku's eyes froze, and his face became solemn. When I left Mount Lingtai Fountain, my master, Patriarch Bodhi, warned me that your master is an extremely extraordinary person and you're just his puppet. You must be careful in the future. As Goku's words fell, Ye's face suddenly changed, and he suddenly looked at Goku's face, and his face became extremely flushed. After all, ever since he entered the Earth Immortal realm, even saints didn't know of Yuan Ling's existence. However, Patriarch Bodhi had actually said this to Goku. Clearly, Patriarch Bodhi definitely knew who Yuan Ling's true identity was. Brother, did Patriarch Bodhi say who he is? Yi Xian asked with a trembling voice. His eyes shone brightly, and his heart was in turmoil. Goku shook his head helplessly when he saw how agitated Yi Xian was. My master is free and unfettered in the three realms. He doesn't care about the disputes of the three realms. He didn't tell me who your master is. Disappointment flashed through Yi Xian's eyes, but it disappeared in the blink of an eye. The thought of going to Mount Lingtai Fangsuan rose in his heart. Clearly, he could only find traces of Yuan Ling if he personally went to see Patriarch Bodhi. Goku sighed when he saw Yi Xian in deep thought. A worthy younger brother, I know what you're thinking, but I still have to advise you not to disturb Patriarch Bodhi. Since my master didn't tell me the truth, he won't tell you even if you go and ask. Why? Yi Xian was stunned. My master is very powerful. Even I can't see through him. Moreover, he has never participated in the disputes of the three realms. Even if you beg him, he won't tell you. This is also to avoid being involved in this great calamity of the world. Goku spoke tirelessly. He paused slightly at this point, and a hint of seriousness flashed across his eyes. He continued, there's one more thing I want to tell you. The ancient demon court has already appeared. The Eastern Emperor Tai and Di Jun have reappeared in the world. As the saying goes, there can't be two suns in the sky and two rulers in the people. There can only be one celestial court in the world. You must be careful. Ancient demon court? Yi Xian was already shocked by the news of Yuan Ling. At this moment, he heard the news of the ancient demon court from Goku, which made him frown. A worthy younger brother, I have to tell you that the two celestial emperors of the ancient demon court are the strongest experts below the sage realm. They are only one step away from stepping into the sage realm. They are only stronger than the 12 ancestors of the ancient sorcerers. If they really want to take back the celestial court, you must not face them head-on, Goku warned solemnly. The strongest experts below the sage realm? Yi Xian murmured, and a look of surprise flashed across his eyes. According to what Yi Xian knew, there were only a few realms of sage to be. From the early stage of sage to be, one could sever one's corpse, two's corpse, and become a sage. One had to know that Chiyu was only comparable to a sage to be who had severed two's corpse. When he activated the Calamity Transcender transformation, he would not be at a disadvantage. What did the strongest expert below the sage realm mean? Looking at the puzzled look on Yi Xian's face, Goku slowly explained, the path of sage to be is not what you think it is, brother. As Goku slowly explained, he finally unveiled the mysterious veil of the sage to be realm. As everyone knew, there were three paths to becoming a sage. The first was to become a sage through merit, the second was to sever three's corpse, and the third was to prove one's Tao through strength. However, one should not forget that this was not the sage to be realm. This was the way of becoming a sage, and it had nothing to do with the sage to be realm. The way of becoming a sage was to let a person become a sage quickly. This was a shortcut. On the other hand, the sage to be realm was to cultivate step by step. As time passed, one's cultivation base would become stronger and stronger, and one's combat strength would become unimaginably terrifying. The so-called way of severing three's corpse was the way to become a sage. It could not completely measure one's cultivation base and combat strength. After all, not every sage to be in this world would cultivate the way of severing three's corpse. Take Sage Nuwa for example. Back then, she was just an ordinary sage to be. However, in the end, with the help of the merit of mending the heavens and creating man and the primordial purple chi, she managed to step into the sage realm from an ordinary sage to be. For example, even though Chiyu had a sage to be who could sever two's corpse, he was still far from being comparable to the two heavenly emperors of the ancient demon court. That was because the two heavenly emperors had existed for countless years. Regardless of cultivation base or combat strength, they were already at the pinnacle. They were only a step away from becoming a sage. However, they could not take that step. That was because other than the three ways of becoming a sage, no one could rely on their cultivation base to step into the sage realm. This was the tragedy of being a sage realm. In the past, Sun Wukong had cultivated the way of severing three's corpse to become a sage because he did not want to be a sage to be. However, Yi Xian's appearance made him realize that this path was wrong. That was why he destroyed the way of severing three's corpse to become a sage. However, Sun Wukong's cultivation base did not decrease. That was because he only destroyed the way of becoming a sage, not his own cultivation base. As Sun Wukong slowly explained, Yi Xian finally understood that the three ways of becoming a sage were only keys that could open the door to the sage realm. They did not represent one's cultivation base and combat strength. As Sun Wukong slowly explained, Yi Xian finally understood what the sage-to-be realm was. Chapter 685. Brother, I need to go into seclusion for a while. I hope you can protect the celestial court for me during this time, Yi Xian said solemnly. Brother, don't worry about it. With me in the celestial court, I don't think anyone would dare to act presumptuously in the celestial court. Goku nodded in agreement. They toasted each other and drank until half a day had passed before Goku left the Celestial Emperor's palace. Yi Xian had already instructed Goku not to let anyone disturb his seclusion without his permission. Inside the Celestial Emperor's palace, Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the void with his gray-white hair hanging behind his head. He slowly raised his hand and ripples bloomed in the void as two objects appeared in front of him. The mysterious little cauldron had split into two and was currently floating in the air. It didn't emit the slightest bit of an unusual aura. However, Yi Xian's eyes were extremely serious, because what he was about to do next was extremely important to him. Buzz. The Bronze Celestial Sutra rippled out and its pages flipped rapidly. When the Bronze Celestial Sutra appeared, the mysterious small cauldron that had split into two underwent a miraculous change. The two small cauldrons glowed with a milky white halo. However, this light was not dazzling to the eyes, but it made people feel as if their souls were about to be sucked into it and gave people a sense of dizziness. Buzz. A buzzing sound was heard as the two small cauldrons gradually merged together in the void until a dazzling white light illuminated the entire Celestial Emperor's palace. A white jade cauldron also appeared in the void. Suddenly, before Yi Xian could react, the small cauldron turned into a white light and shot toward the Bronze Celestial Sutra. As the pages of the Bronze Celestial Sutra flipped rapidly, the mysterious small cauldron instantly merged with the Bronze Celestial Sutra. Just as I thought. Yi Xian roared with a trembling voice. He waved his hand and took the Bronze Immortal Sutra into his hand. He looked at the Bronze Immortal Sutra and saw a mysterious small cauldron appearing on a blank page. It was currently emitting a faint light, giving off an extremely mysterious feeling. In the past, Yi Xian had obtained a small furnace, allowing him to learn the Tribulation Transcender transformation from it. Today, what kind of pleasant surprise would this second small furnace bring him? Today's conversation with Sun Wukong made Yi Xian's heart heavy. Although he was a half-step sage to be, compared to the two celestial emperors of the ancient demon court, he was still lacking. Moreover, Yi Xian had killed tens of thousands of people from the Wu tribe. He had long become an enemy of the Wu tribe. When the 12 ancient ancestors of sorcery were born, they would definitely seek him for revenge. Therefore, Yi Xian had to improve his cultivation in the shortest time possible to deal with the enemies from all sides in the future. Let me see what kind of pleasant surprise you will bring me. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. He kept calming himself down. After a dozen breaths, he calmed down and slowly pressed his palm on the Bronze Immortal Sutra. Suddenly, a roar that could shatter the heavens was heard. The Bronze Immortal Sutra shook violently. Chaotic divine runes rose from the Bronze Immortal Sutra and formed a strange creature. This creature had the head of a dragon and the body of a tiger. Its eyes were scarlet and its limbs were covered with sharp blades. There was also an extremely terrifying evil aura rising from its body. Obviously, the roar came from this monster. It was unknown what kind of creature this monster was. It roared angrily. Although its body was illusory and formed from chaotic divine runes, it was releasing an extremely shocking aura. The monster moved. It brought with it an extremely fierce and boundless aura into Yi Xian's forehead. This also made Yi Xian's eyes glaze over. He fell from the void and crashed heavily on the ground. A painful groan came from Yi Xian's mouth. A black flame suddenly burned around him and instantly engulfed him. In the black flame, Yi Xian's face was extremely distorted. Traces of blood constantly flowed out from all parts of his body. However, the strange thing was that the blood was not evaporated by the black flame. Instead, it drew an extremely complicated pattern that spread across Yi Xian's body. It was as if it was an extremely mysterious array. In the Heavenly Emperor's palace, Yi Xian's painful groan gradually faded away. However, the black flame became more terrifying. The blood-red array pattern completely covered him. This situation lasted for 3 years. No one knew whether Yi Xian was alive or dead. Another 3 years passed. The black flame gradually faded. The blood-red array pattern continued to fuse into Yi Xian's body. When the black flame completely disappeared, Yi Xian finally opened his eyes. Suddenly, it was as if the 9 heavens and rivers were in chaos, as if time and space were inverting. Yi Xian's eyes were spinning, and his pupils were pitch black to the extreme, as if everything in the world was about to be buried in his eyes under his gaze. Yi Xian sat cross-legged as he formed a mysterious incantation with both hands. Strands of black flames suddenly appeared, and blood-colored lines interweaved behind him, converging into an extremely mysterious array pattern. Tribulation Transcender Devour. Suddenly Yi Xian roared. The black flame burned to the extreme. The blood-red array pattern hummed and rotated. It directly made the entire Heavenly Emperor's palace become extremely illusory. This strange scene was too shocking. Whoosh! A stream of turbid air gushed out of Yi Xian's mouth, and an explosion came from the other side of the void. The blood-red array pattern behind him collapsed and disappeared. The black flame burning around his body strangely disappeared, as if it had never appeared. Yi Xian clenched his fists and roared, "Tribulation Transcenders Devour. It's so powerful that it makes me tremble. How can there be such a technique in this world?" His body and mind trembled to the extreme. Tribulation Transcenders Devour. This was the surprise that the second small cauldron brought to Yi Xian. When Yi Xian found out about the use of Tribulation Transcenders Devour, even if he was someone who wouldn't be shocked even if the sky collapsed, he still couldn't control himself. What was Tribulation Transcenders Devour? Tribulation Transcenders Devour was different from the Tribulation Transcender Transformation. The Tribulation Transcender Transformation increased Yi Xian's realm, but this realm could only be under the Sage Realm. When Yi Xian stepped into the Sage Realm, the Tribulation Transcender Transformation would have no effect on him. However, Tribulation Transcenders Devour was different. This was an extremely heaven-defying technique. It could be said to be an extremely terrifying technique. It was similar to the Tribulation Transcender technique, but it was also different. The Tribulation Transcender technique was to devour the cultivation of others to improve oneself. Tribulation Transcenders Devour was also to devour. However, what it devoured was not the cultivation of others or their cultivation, but their innate magical ability. What was an innate magical ability? For example, Kong Xian was the first 5-colored peacock since the creation of the world. His innate magical ability was the 5-colored divine light. If Yi Xian devoured Kong Xian, he would be able to obtain his innate magical ability, the 5-colored divine light. Of course, Kong Xian was Yi Xian's close friend, so he naturally wouldn't covet his 5-colored divine light. However, from this, one could see how terrifying and heaven-defying the Tribulation Transcenders Devour was. Some people might ask, but devouring the innate magical ability of others isn't a big deal, so how can it be called a heaven-defying technique? Chapter 686. In fact, the reason was very simple. One had to know that in this world, those who possessed innate divine abilities were by no means mediocre. They were all extremely terrifying existences. Yi Xian once had a doubt. The person he suspected to be from the future had crossed the river of time and arrived in the present world. However, Yi Xian was very clear that he had never dabbled in the power of space-time, nor had he cultivated any space-time techniques. But today, when he obtained the Tribulation Transcenders Devour, he finally understood. Among the 12 ancient witches, Dijiang was the ancestral witch of space, and his innate divine ability was the power of space. The Candle Dragon was the ancestral witch of time, and his innate divine ability was the power of time. If Yi Xian could devour these 2 ancestral witches, then he would be able to obtain their innate divine abilities at the same time and take the power of time and space for himself. Moreover, it wasn't just the innate divine abilities of the 2 ancestral witches. Take a look at the Bell of Primal Chaos in the hands of Dong Huangtai. It was his innate divine ability, and if Yi Xian could devour Dong Huangtai, he would be able to control the bell of primal chaos. By analogy, Yi Xian could devour the innate divine ability of anyone who possessed it and take it for himself. However, there was no invincible technique in this world. Even though the Tribulation Transcender's devour was extremely terrifying, the prerequisite was that the enemy had to be killed before it could be devoured. However, Yi Xian was already satisfied. With the Tribulation Transcender's devour in hand, he now had an extremely terrifying method, and he wouldn't need to fear any enemies in the future. Inside the Heavenly Emperor's palace, Yi Xian sorted out his thoughts and constantly thought about his future path. It wasn't until 7 days and 7 nights had passed that Yi Xian walked out of the Heavenly Emperor's palace. At the same time, outside the 33rd layer of heaven, Nuwa Palace, thousands of strands of auspicious qi and holy light permeated the air. Strands of Tao laws were born in the void before vanishing without a trace. This made the entire Nuwa Palace appear even more solemn and dignified. Sage Nuwa sat cross-legged in the air with a woman accompanying her. It was Xue Fengge, the former Xueji. It was clear that she had officially become Her Highness Nuwa's disciple. At this moment, she was standing respectfully beside Her Highness Nuwa. Her eyes were filled with surprise as she looked down. Dong Huang Tai and Emperor Jun were standing in the palace of Nuwa. They were talking to Nuwa. Apparently, they were both from the untainted land and knew Nuwa before she became a sage. Her Highness Nuwa, although you are a sage and are not involved in the karma of the 3 realms, you are also a member of the demon tribe. Now that Emperor Jun and I have reappeared in the 3 realms, I hope that you can help us on account of the fact that we are both members of the demon tribe, Dong Huang Tai said softly. In the past, Ancestor Hongjun had decreed that sages are not to be born. You'd better go back. Nuwa's voice was very calm, without the slightest ripple, but the rejection in her words was very obvious. Ha! Suddenly, Emperor Jun laughed wildly and looked directly at Nuwa. His posture was slightly unreasonable. This made Nuwa frown, but she did not say anything. Her Highness is a sage. We naturally do not dare to force you, nor do we have the ability to force you. But I wonder if you still remember that in the past, when Zhurong and Gonggong fought and knocked down Mount Buzhou, the water from the outer sky poured into the untainted land. It was Her Highness who mended the sky with the 5-colored godly stone and saved the untainted land, Emperor Jun said coldly. What are you trying to say? Nuwa's expression changed slightly, and the breath around her began to become chaotic. Apparently, Emperor Jun's words could change her mood. There must be something unknown about it. Her Highness, do you still remember that there were no human tribe in the untainted land in the past? It was you who created the human tribe. However, the human tribe was born weak. If Her Highness had not begged us to protect the human tribe, I'm afraid that the human tribe would have been extinct in the untainted land, not to mention become the protagonist of today's heaven and earth, right? Emperor Jun sneered. Are you threatening me? Nuwa suddenly said coldly, and an extremely terrifying holy aura spread out. Apparently, she was really angry because of Emperor Jun's words. Unfortunately, the 2 celestial emperors were not afraid of Nuwa's anger, as if they knew that Nuwa would not attack them. Sure enough, although Nuwa was extremely angry, she did not attack them. The holy aura she released dissipated in an instant, and she became silent. The 5-colored celestial stone is a wonder of heaven and earth. There are only a few of them in the world. We gave it to Her Highness, so that Her Highness could obtain the merit of heaven and earth. The human tribe was weak, and the demon tribe protected them. We gave the human tribe a place to live for Her Highness's sake. We also issued a strict order not to kill the human tribe, and gave them a pure land so that they would not be killed. Emperor Jun said bluntly, without any concealment. He was slowly recounting the past. Mending the heavens and creating the human tribe, Her Highness, you are the pride of the demon tribe. Although we can't enter the sage realm in our lifetime, we have no regrets as long as we have Her Highness, Dong Huang Tai said calmly. Silence, silence, extreme silence. Their conversation caused the entire Nuwa Dao Palace to be deathly silent to the extreme, and Nuwa was even silent. Obviously, they weren't lying at all. Yes, if you didn't give me the 5-colored celestial stone, I wouldn't have been able to complete the merit of heaven and earth. If you didn't help me protect the newborn human tribe in the untainted land, the human tribe would have been annihilated in the untainted land. My position as a saint is all thanks to you. Nuwa stood up from the void and solemnly bowed to the two. However, the two slightly moved away and did not accept Nuwa's saint bow. You don't have to do this, Her Highness. You are the heaven-ordaining saint. Even without our help, you have a place in the 6 great sages. However, the ancient demon court has reappeared in the world today. Although you are a saint, you are also a member of the demon tribe. Today, we have no other intentions. We just want to use Her Highness's name to reunite the billions of demon tribes. We also hope that Her Highness can help us on account of the fact that we are all members of the demon tribe and let the demon tribe rise again in the world. Dong Huang Tai and Emperor Jun bowed 3 times to Nuwa. Obviously, this was the purpose of their visit. Nuwa, the saint of the 3 realms. As long as she could issue a decree, the billions of demon tribes scattered in the 3 realms would reunite under the ancient demon court. This was extremely important to the two. This? Nuwa frowned, and there was great hesitation in her eyes. She really wanted to refuse the two, because if she issued a decree, she would also be involved in the great tribulation of heaven and earth. However, Nuwa could not refuse because to a large extent, her merit of mending heaven and creating human beings was due to the help of the two, which allowed her to become a saint. This was the karma of becoming a saint, and also the favor she owed in the past. Today, the two were here to ask her for this favor. She could not refuse at all, because the favor of becoming a saint had to be repaid by her. Even a saint could not avoid karma. If she really refused, her saint heart would be unstable and eventually collapse, and she would face the end of being annihilated. A saint's heart was eternal and immortal, but the power of karma could not be violated even by a saint. This was the law of the heavens. Not to mention Nuwa, even Tao ancestor Hongjun, who had integrated with the Tao, did not dare to touch the power of karma. Okay, I promise you. After 3 short breaths, Nuwa nodded slowly. She calmed down again and sat cross-legged in the void, but her eyes were slightly closed and she did not say anything. This made Dong Huang Tai and Emperor Jun look at each other. They nodded and bowed to Nuwa, then turned and left Nuwa Palace. Chapter 687. Nuwa Palace. Thousands of streams of auspicious air rippled outwards, causing the space to distort slightly. A formless, oppressive atmosphere grew, making it hard for people to breathe. Nuwa frowned, and the aura around her became extremely chaotic. Clearly, the request of the 2 celestial emperors made her feel extremely uneasy. She originally wanted to refuse, but in the end, she couldn't. In the past, Tao ancestor Hongjun had given a strict order that saints were not to be born, and they were not to interfere in the affairs of the 3 realms. But now, she was going to be the first to go against Tao ancestor Hongjun. Although she didn't want to do so, she had no other choice. The favor of becoming a saint must be returned. Nuwa deeply understood this principle. She had no choice but to agree to the 2 celestial emperors' request. This could be considered as returning the favor of the past. To reunite billions of demons and recreate the glory of the ancient demon court, Nuwa wanted to personally issue a decree to announce the return of the ancient demon court to the 3 realms. This matter seemed simple, but it also meant that Nuwa was firmly tied to the demon race's war chariot. In the future, there would be too many troubles. One must know that the ancient demon court and the shaman tribe were mortal enemies. Just this point alone was enough to give Nuwa a headache. If the great shaman tribe tribulation of the past were to happen again, she would probably be implicated this time. Master, you are a high and mighty saint. You can completely reject the 2 celestial emperors. Why do you want to create trouble for yourself and get involved with the demon race? Xue Fengge had cultivated with Nuwa for tens of thousands of years. She had long been ranked among the Daluo Jingxian, and Nuwa doted on her endlessly. This made Xue Fengge probe. Fengge, when you become a quasi-saint in the future, you will understand that the cycle of karma is the principle of heaven and earth. Although I am a saint, I still have to follow the path of karma. Naturally, I can't reject them. Nuwa sighed softly. But Master, have you forgotten? There's already a celestial court in the three realms. If you were to personally gather the billions of demons for the ancient Fey court, then which of the two celestial courts would be the orthodox? Master, you should know that Sister Xian Envy has married into the celestial court and is the queen mother. Although Yi Tiandi is not as powerful as the two demonic emperors, he has the support of the Tong Tian. This is a complicated relationship. Not waiting for Xuefenga to finish, Queen Nuwa frowned. This caused Xuefenga to stop talking. Clearly, how could Queen Nuwa not know the importance of this matter? Fenga, you're right, but there are some things that Master can't do anything about. This time, I've helped the two of them, so from now on, Master and the two of them are even. Her Highness Nuwa sighed. But Xuefenga's face changed slightly. Just as she was about to speak up to dissuade Queen Nuwa had already disappeared into the void. Xuefenga didn't even have the chance to do so. Fenga, you can focus on your cultivation in the Nuwa Palace. Master will make a trip to the roaming Jade Palace. Queen Nuwa had already left, but her voice was still reverberating in Xuefenga's ears. Following the departure of Queen Nuwa, Xuefenga's brows furrowed tightly. A sharp glint flashed across her eyes. Both her hands conjured a mysterious hand seal as she sat cross-legged within the Nuwa Palace. It was as though she was trying to contact some mysterious person. 33 heavens of the celestial court. There were hundreds of things waiting to be done as the sun and moon alternated. The celestial court that was destroyed by Dei was now brand new. The numinous sky hall of the bullfighting palace was rebuilt as well. The celestial court had regained its former order. Numinous Sky Hall. Yi Xian sat on the throne of the heavenly emperor while the Empyrean fairies sat on the phoenix throne. Below the both of them were the members of the celestial court. Everyone who could appear in the numinous Sky Hall was someone who held the authority of the celestial court. Most of them were immortals of the Jia sect. The rest were the demon kings. Ever since Yi Xian had obtained the position of the heavenly emperor, he had indeed fulfilled his promise. Not only did he allow the immortals of the Jia sect to hold the authority of the celestial court, there were even immortals of the Jia sect teaching the Tao in the 4 continents of the Earth immortal world. They were already showing signs of becoming the #1 sect in the 3 realms. The Chan sect was completely suppressed by Yi Xian. Many of the orthodoxies of the Chan sect were destroyed, and Yi Xian was one of them. It could be said that the Chan sect had suffered a disastrous decline and was struggling at death's door. If it were not for the fact that the Chan sect was founded by Yuanshi Tianzuan, it would have disappeared from the world long ago. The Jia sect was thriving, and tens of thousands of immortals came to court. Everything was developing in a good direction, and the immortals of the Jia sect were recruiting disciples. After hundreds of thousands of years, the Jia sect would definitely be able to regain its former glory. Your Majesty, you personally attacked the Wu tribe and killed Dei, the culprit. You have restored the dignity of the celestial court. However, the Wu tribe is not to be trifled with. What's your next decision, Your Majesty? Shin Gongbao bowed and said, The Wu tribe has the 12 ancient ancestors of sorcery. Except for the sages who can subdue them, almost no one in the world dares to be their enemy. This time, the celestial court and the Wu tribe will not rest until one of us is dead. I'm afraid things will not end so simply. The goddess of golden spirit echoed. Have you too forgotten that the Wu tribe has the 12 ancient ancestors of sorcery? But we have not only the celestial emperor behind us, but also the 3 pure ones, Tong Tian, and the master of goddess Shen Nyu is Nuwa. If the 12 ancient ancestors of sorcery really invade us, I'm afraid the 2 sages will not sit back and do nothing. Rakimo said in a low voice. At this time, he also bowed to Yi Xian and said, It's just that in addition to the 12 ancient ancestors of sorcery, there are 12 ancient sorcery in the Wu tribe. Qiyu is only one of them. If you are not in the celestial court, I'm afraid, Rakimo paused, but he did not say anything. Everyone already understood what he meant. Obviously, the celestial court did not have a sage-to-be in charge at the moment. If the ancient sorcery of the Wu tribe attacked the celestial court, they would definitely bring a great disaster to the celestial court again. As Rock Mo's words echoed in the Lingxiao Hall, the other immortals nodded slowly. Everyone had a serious look in their eyes. Although they knew that the 12 ancient ancestors of sorcery had not been born, the ancient sorcery of the Wu tribe was not to be trifled with. They were afraid that there would be another dispute in the future. On the throne of the celestial emperor, Yi Xian looked calm. He naturally knew what the immortals were thinking, and the celestial court was indeed facing a great problem. Sage-to-be. There was no sage-to-be in the celestial court. This was a great problem, and it was also an urgent matter for Yi Xian. If he was not in the celestial court, how could the celestial court resist another sage-to-be? Heaven, earth, and the three realms were vast. Among the three realms of heaven, earth, and man, the most terrifying orthodoxies were not the Chan school and Jie school, but three orthodoxies. Rather than orthodoxies, it was better to call them ethnic groups. Needless to say, the Wu tribe bloodline. The 12 ancient ancestors of sorcery were transformed from Pangu's blood essence, and the Wu tribe claimed to be the descendants of Pangu. Every member of the Wu tribe had extremely terrifying combat strength. The ancient demon court had 2 celestial emperors, and the ancient demons were the core of the demon race. This was the second great orthodoxy. The last orthodoxy was the underworld. The ghost emperors of 5 directions, the Yama kings of the 10 halls, the civil and military judges, the black and white impermanents, and the ox head and horse face. This seemed to be the normal structure of the underworld, but one should not forget that the underworld controlled the 6 paths of reincarnation, and also had the river of forgetfulness and the underworld. There were hundreds of millions of ghost soldiers and ghost generals, among which there were countless ghost immortals and daluo. There were also many sage-to-be realm experts. Chapter 688. There was the Nether River Patriarch in the Nether Blood Sea, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva in the 18 levels of hell, and Meng Po on the Bridge of Helplessness. No one knew their cultivation bases. The Emperor of Feng Du sat in the center and ruled the 5 ghostly regions. How could he be an ordinary person? These 3 orthodoxies all had one thing in common, which was that they all had quasi-saints. On the other hand, the celestial court did not have a single quasi-saint. Sun Wukong was only Yi Xian's close friend, so it was impossible for him to become a member of the celestial court. At this moment, a difficult problem was placed in front of Yi Xian. This was also the greatest hidden danger of the celestial court, and it had to be solved by him, the celestial emperor. The Lingxiao Hall was silent. The immortals all focused their eyes on Yi Xian. No one dared to make a sound, obviously afraid of disturbing Yi Xian. Quasi-saint? Where could he find a quasi-saint to sit in the celestial court? What kind of joke was this? How could a quasi-saint be restrained by others? This was simply a huge problem. Yi Xian constantly overturned all kinds of ideas in his mind, and his brows were tightly knitted together. The celestial court left behind by the Jade Emperor was too weak. Although it had undergone earth-shattering changes after his vigorous transformation, how could he find a quasi-saint? There had never been a quasi-saint in the celestial court. Suddenly Yi Xian's eyes widened. A light flashed across his mind, and a person appeared in his mind. How could I forget him? Isn't he a member of the celestial court? With him sitting in the celestial court, even if the 12 ancient witches really came, they would have to hold back. Yi Xian's face lit up, and his brows instantly relaxed. I've already made my decision. You don't need to discuss it anymore. Yi Xian returned from his thoughts, and his voice echoed in the Lingxiao Hall. Then he stood up from the emperor's throne, turned into a ray of light, and disappeared. Yi Xian's sudden departure stunned the immortals. Although they did not know where Yi Xian had gone, he must have thought of something. 33rd Heaven, Tushita Palace. Yi Xian paced around Tushita Palace with his hands behind his back. A jade tablet quietly appeared in his hand. A trace of hesitation appeared on his face, but he still resolutely crushed the jade tablet. The jade tablet shattered, and ripples appeared in the void. A water screen mirror image condensed. In the mirror, there was an old Taoist with white hair and beard sitting cross-legged in the middle of the bamboo forest. This old Taoist had a sage-like demeanor and a benevolent countenance. He wore a purple-gold bagua robe and was slowly inhaling and exhaling as if he was immersed in cultivation. "Old Lord," Yi Xian smiled. "Taishang Lao Jun." Lao Tzu was transformed from the good corpse and replaced sage Lao Tzu to guard the celestial court. However, Yi Xian killed the Jade Emperor in the past and forced Taishang Lao Jun out of the celestial court. Until today, the two of them met again through the water screen. "Yi Xian, have you fulfilled the promise from back then?" In the mirror image, Taishang Lao Jun slowly opened his eyes and looked at Yi Xian through the mirror image. His eyes were very calm, as if he had already expected that the two of them would meet again one day. "The walls have ears. I'll wait for you in Tushita Palace." Yi Xian only said a simple sentence and directly waved the water screen mirror image away. With him in charge of the celestial court again, all the enemies will be extremely afraid. Yi Xian smiled strangely and muttered to himself. Taishang Lao Jun was transformed from the good corpse of sage Lao Tzu. His cultivation was only at the peak of zenith heaven. However, this was not his true cultivation, but the result of Taishang Lao Jun's efforts to suppress it. This was because Taishang Lao Jun had already developed an independent consciousness and had always wanted to get rid of sage Lao Tzu's control. However, if he entered the sage to be, Lao Tzu would definitely know that he had developed an independent consciousness, which would cause him to suffer a great calamity. In the past, Yi Xian forced him to leave the celestial court for 3 reasons. First, Yi Xian threatened him with this matter. Second, Yi Xian's cultivation was too weak to control this person. Third, the two of them made a secret deal. The deal was very simple. Yi Xian had to completely cut off the connection between Taishang Lao Jun and sage Lao Tzu, so that he could truly become an independent individual. Today, Yi Xian's cultivation had entered the half-step to sage to be and could complete the deal between the two. This was because he could already use the heaven-destroying halberd and could cut through anything. Naturally, it was easy to cut off the connection between Lao Tzu and Taishang Lao Jun. Without sage Lao Tzu's restraint, Taishang Lao Jun could directly enter the sage to be without suppressing his cultivation and truly become an independent individual. He would no longer have any connection with sage Lao Tzu. Of course, cutting off the connection between Taishang Lao Jun and sage Lao Tzu would definitely alert Lao Tzu. If Lao Tzu personally came to the celestial court and discovered that Taishang Lao Jun was no longer under his control, there would definitely be a great change. However, sages could not be born. This was the rule set by Tao ancestor Hongjun. Moreover, the great calamity of heaven and earth had already begun. It was likely that Lao Tzu would not be born. Otherwise, he would definitely be involved in this great calamity of heaven and earth. Yi Xian was betting, and so was Taishang Lao Jun. Yi Xian was betting that Taishang Lao Jun would be used by him, while Taishang Lao Jun was betting that he would not be willing to be controlled by a sage. The two of them hit it off. It could be said that they were playing with fire. 7 days later, a person was welcomed into Tushita Palace. It was the original owner of this place, Taishang Lao Jun. No one knew what happened in Tushita Palace on this day. The only thing they knew was that the heavens and earth were extremely distorted. A wisp of darkness covered Tushita Palace, and miserable cries could be heard from private messages. 3 years had passed. The boundless darkness was dispersing, and the door of Tushita Palace opened. 2 figures walked out of Tushita Palace. Yi Xian was dressed in black. His hair was draped behind his head, and his face was somewhat pale. Evidently, he had used up a lot of his cultivation to cut off the connection between Taishang Lao Jun and Lao Tzu. After all, Yi Xian did not dare to be the slightest bit careless when it concerned a sage. Taishang Lao Jun's face was ruddy, and his eyes were filled with excitement. At this moment, he was bowing to Yi Xian. "Don't worry, Celestial Emperor. This old man will become a sage to be in less than 1,000 years. As long as this old man is in the celestial court, no one can be presumptuous here." Taishang Lao Jun solemnly promised. Good. Yi Xian nodded. His body suddenly turned illusory, and he turned into a stream of light and disappeared into the distance. Taishang Laojun returned to Tushida Palace. As the palace door closed, he officially entered a state of seclusion. Taishang Laojun was transformed from Lao Tzu's good corpse. His foundation was unimaginably terrifying. He could have become a sage-to-be long ago, but he had been suppressing it for endless time. Now that Yi Xian had helped him cut off the connection between him and Lao Tzu, he could finally step into the sage-to-be without worry. Perhaps some people would ask why Taishang Laojun was so bold. Was he not afraid that Lao Tzu would sense it and personally come to the celestial court to kill him? The answer was no. This was because Taishang Laojun had a great ambition, and it was the biggest secret in his heart. He had never told anyone about this secret, and it was even more impossible for him to tell Yi Xian. This secret was to become a sage-to-be. That's right, to become a sage-to-be. Becoming a sage-to-be was only the first step. Taishang Laojun's goal was to become the seventh sage-to-be. This was also the reason why he dared to take the risk and cut off the connection with Lao Tzu. As Lao Tzu's good corpse, he had all of Lao Tzu's memories. This was his strongest foundation. Naturally, he wanted to become the seventh sage-to-be. He seemed to be guarding the celestial court for Yi Xian, but his real goal was to prepare for becoming a sage-to-be. This was because there were two major conditions to become a sage-to-be. One was the merit of heaven and earth, and the other was the Hong Meng immortal vapor. He did not know where the Hong Meng immortal vapor was, but he knew how to obtain the merit of heaven. The condition to obtain the merit of heaven was that it was related to the 33rd celestial court. Of course, Yi Xian did not know what Taishang Laojun was thinking. If Yi Xian knew, Yi Xian would definitely reevaluate Taishang Laojun. He did not expect him to be so ambitious. Chapter 689. Bullfighting Palace. The palace had no roof and the sky was filled with stars. Strands of starlight cascaded down and illuminated Yi Xian's figure, giving him a mysterious and leisurely aura. Taishang Laojun had returned to the Tushida Palace. This was also a risky move by Yi Xian because Taishang Laojun was formed by Lao Tzu's good corpse. It would make all his enemies hesitate to attack him. The head of the three clear ones, Sage Lao Tzu, was also known as Taishang Dao Tianzuan. Yi Xian realized that he was playing with fire. However, there was no turning back. He could only continue walking down this path until he became a quasi-sage. Suddenly Yi Xian's eyes widened and his hands quickly formed a seal. Ripples appeared in the void and an illusory figure appeared in front of him. It was Shuefengge from the Nuwa Palace. Martial uncle? What happened? Yi Xian frowned. One had to know that the two of them had never used this method of communication. Yi Xian had even told Shuefengge in the past that unless something big happened, she should never use this method to contact him. If Nuwa found out, Shuefengge would definitely be consigned to eternal damnation. However, Shuefengge had taken the initiative to contact him. Obviously, something big had happened. Otherwise, she wouldn't have risked being discovered by Nuwa to contact him. Martial uncle, something big has happened. Shuefengge quickly told him about the two heavenly emperors coming to the Nuwa Palace. It took her half an hour to finish her narration. Yi Xian's aura turned gloomy and he became silent. Billions of demons have gathered and the ancient demon court has reappeared. Yi Xian muttered to himself. His voice became extremely heavy and revealed a hint of depression. Nuwa made a move? Yi Xian kept pacing around the bullfighting palace. His face was gloomy like water, and the aura around his body was extremely sinister. He had sunk into an indescribable irritation. If one were to observe carefully, they would notice that Yi Xian's eyes had a sense of imminent danger. Yi Xian had long known about the birth of the ancient demon court. The cultivation of the two celestial emperors was naturally terrifying, and they even had the ancient demons by their side. This was an extremely terrifying force. However, what truly made Yi Xian's heart heavy was not the ancient demon court, but Saint Nuwa's attack. This already made Yi Xian feel extremely anxious. The reason was simple. In the past, Yi Xian had thought that the 6 sages wouldn't emerge into the world because Tao ancestor Hongjun had issued a strict order after the War of the Gods, and he didn't allow the sages to emerge into the world and interfere in the strife of the 3 dimensions. But now, Nuwa was the first to break this rule. This also meant that the sages had already intervened in the 3 dimensions. Based on this, the other 5 sages would definitely not remain indifferent. Moreover, with the support of Saint Nuwa, the demons of the 3 dimensions would completely gather under the ancient demon court. This was an extremely heavy blow to Yi Xian. As the saying goes, there can be no 2 suns in the sky, and no 2 masters in the people. There could only be one celestial court in this world. If the ancient demon court wanted to clear its name, the first thing they would deal with would probably be his 33rd celestial court. Yi Xian was an extremely proud person, but he wasn't an arrogant person. He knew that his current cultivation was still a distance away from the 2 celestial emperors. Even if he used the Tribulation Transcender transformation, he wouldn't be their match. Moreover, don't forget that apart from the 2 celestial emperors, the ancient demon court had tens of thousands of demons. The weakest among them was Daluo Jingxian, and there were many quasi-sages among them. The 33rd celestial court couldn't resist them at all. Xueji, did Nuwa go to the Green Palace to see Tong Tian? Yi Xian asked solemnly. Yes, Nuwa told me personally, Xueji said worriedly in Nuwa's palace. This is bad. Yi Xian said coldly, his eyes flickering with murderous intent. Obviously, Nuwa went to see Tong Tian because of the 33rd celestial court. After all, the celestial court was supported by Tong Tian, and his position as celestial emperor was also recognized by Tong Tian. Martial uncle, what can I do for you? In Nuwa's palace, although Xuefenga couldn't see Yi Xian, she could feel the heaviness in Yi Xian's heart. This made her frown, and she hoped that she could help Yi Xian. Delay, you must delay. Delay Nuwa's decree. Martial uncle needs time. In Bullfighting Palace, Yi Xian said solemnly. He had no other choice now. He could only hope that Xueji could delay Nuwa's decree. During this time, he had to think of a way to break it. Martial uncle, don't worry. No matter what, Xueji will delay Nuwa's decree, Xuefenga said solemnly. Xueji, you must remember to delay as long as you can. If you can't, you must take care of yourself. Don't let Nuwa discover your identity, Yi Xian reminded. Yes, martial uncle. The image in the void dissipated, and the connection between the 2 was cut off. Only Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. His eyes were extremely deep, and no one knew what he was thinking. Tongan, are you really going to give up on the celestial court and give up on me? Suddenly Yi Xian said gloomily. He looked up at the 33rd heaven, and a gloomy look flashed across his eyes. Outside the 33rd heaven, in Roaming Jade Palace. Senior brother, what do you think of my suggestion? Nuwa asked calmly. She was saying something to Tong Tian. Junior sister, you want the disciples of the Jie sect to withdraw from the celestial court. This is asking me to give up on Yi Xian. Tong Tian's face was gloomy, and his tone was even more dissatisfied. Obviously, he couldn't accept Nuwa's suggestion at all. This was because Yi Xian was the person who made the Jie sect prosper. If he gave up on Yi Xian, wouldn't the Jie sect, which had just shown signs of prosperity, fall once again? Senior brother, have you ever thought that the ancient demon court is the orthodox celestial court? The celestial court in this world is just a replica of the ancient demon court, and the Eastern Emperor Tai and Dijun are the leaders of the demon race. How can Yi Xian be a match for the ancient demon court? Moreover, senior brother, don't forget that there are billions of demons in the 3 realms. When I issue a decree, these billions of demons will return to the ancient demon court and recreate the grand occasion when the ancient demon court was in charge of the 3 realms in the past. The 33rd heaven celestial court can only be destroyed by the ancient demon court. What will the disciples of the Jie sect do then? Nuwa spoke tirelessly, explaining the powerful relationship. Obviously, she wasn't exaggerating but telling the truth. Hearing Nuwa's words, Tong Tian frowned. Obviously, he also knew that Nuwa was right. The great witch demon war of the past was still fresh in his memory. It was simply an unimaginable catastrophe, but it also fully proved the horror of the ancient demon court. The demon race in the three realms was as numerous as the eternal sand. This was an unimaginably terrifying force, not to mention that the Eastern Emperor Tai and Dijun were figures in the same period as the sages. Although they weren't sages, their cultivation was already at the peak of the sage-to-be, which was definitely not something that Yi Xian could resist at the moment. Did he really have to give up on Yi Xian? A bewildered thought appeared in Tongtian's mind, which also made him hesitate and didn't know what decision to make. Chapter 690. Looking at Tongtian's frown, Niuhua continued to persuade him, "Senior brother, you should know that I owe Saint Qing a favor in the past. I have to repay this favor, even if I have to go against teacher Hongjuan's decree. I'm here today for the sake of the Jie school that senior brother founded. I hope senior brother will reconsider." "Let me think about it," Tong Tian said solemnly. He did not immediately agree to Niuhua's request. Clearly, he still had hope for Yi Xian. "I can guarantee you that when the ancient demon court takes charge of the three realms, the Jie school can still spread its teachings in the three realms. I hope senior brother will not miss the opportunity. I'll take my leave." Niuhua stood up and floated away, leaving Tong Tian alone in the green Turing Palace. He let out a long sigh. Clearly, this was a huge problem for him. If he made the wrong choice, the Jie school that he had founded would collapse. "Yi Xian, you really don't have much time left," Tong Tian said solemnly in the green Turing Palace. An extremely oppressive atmosphere grew in the green Turing Palace, proving that Tongtian's mood was not calm. After Niuhua left the green Turing Palace, she did not return to her Dao field directly. Instead, she headed towards the Jade Void Palace. Clearly, she had not only visited Tong Tian when she left the Niuhua Palace, but also Yuanshi Tianzuan, one of the three pure ones. In the bullfighting palace of the 33rd Celestial Court, Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. He was in deep thought with his eyes closed. The surrounding void was extremely distorted, and an extremely oppressive atmosphere grew in the bullfighting palace. Suddenly, Yi Xian opened his eyes. A sanguine light quietly streaked across them, containing a hint of viciousness. Humans can only rely on themselves. If I really rely on Tongtian's protection, I'm afraid I'll suffer a great calamity sooner or later. The 33rd Celestial Court will also be destroyed, Yi Xian said gloomily. Although he did not know what Niuhua and the Tong Tian had talked about, Yi Xian could guess most of it. After all, the ancient demon court had reappeared in the world, and his celestial court was a stumbling block. No matter what I say, it's still because my cultivation isn't high enough. If I can truly become a quasi-saint, I can stop the rise of the ancient demon court. Yi Xian understood himself and dug out the root of the problem. He also suddenly realized in the bullfighting palace that if he could truly step into the quasi-sage realm and display the tribulation transcender transformation, apart from the sages, no one would be his opponent. Quasi-sage? Origin immortal body? Yi Xian murmured coldly. Whether it was the feud with the witch race or the oppression brought to him by the ancient demon court, the root of it was his lack of cultivation. As long as he could step into the quasi-sage realm, he could talk to the witch race and the ancient demon court on equal terms. Celestial Emperor. Suddenly, an anxious voice came from outside the hall. Venus Taibai walked in quickly. Yi Xian frowned and said, "What's the hurry?" Princess Yaoyue secretly went to the mortal world. The old minister apologizes to the Celestial Emperor. Venus Taibai knelt on the ground, her face full of shame. At this moment, Yi Xian was facing many important matters. Hearing Venus Taibai's words, Yi Xian frowned. How could he have the leisure to care about these trivial matters? Forget it, let her be. It's fine as long as she doesn't cause trouble. You can leave now. Yi Xian was slightly irritated. Yes, this old official will take his leave. Taibai Jinxing hurriedly took his leave. With Venus Taibai's departure, Yi Xian once again thought about how to resist the rise of the ancient demon court. As for Yi Yaoyue secretly going to the mortal world, he could only temporarily put it aside. Eastern Emperor Tai? Dijun? Demon race? Yi Xian muttered to himself. Suddenly, A light flashed in his eyes. Yi Xian waved his hand and a map appeared in his hand. The sea of the northern underworld. Yi Xian said word by word. His eyes were shining as if he had thought of something. Demon Master Kun Peng, how could I forget him? Yi Xian looked at the map in his hand with an extremely strange expression. This map was obtained by Yi Xian when he destroyed the North Sea Dragon Palace. He also got a message from the North Sea Dragon King that Demon Master Kun Peng had died in the sea of the northern underworld. Demon Master Kun Peng. The Emperor's preceptor of the ancient demon court was the master of all demons. In the ancient demon court, he was on an equal footing with the two celestial emperors. In the Great War of Witches and Demons, it was said that Demon Master Kun Peng fought with the ancestor of witches and finally fell between heaven and earth. However, Yi Xian did not believe this rumor. Because Eastern Emperor Tai and Di Jun were still alive, how could Demon Master Kun Peng die? If Kun Peng is not dead and can be used by me, the ancient demon court will not be an iron bucket. It seems that I have to go to the sea of the northern underworld personally, Yi Xian murmured coldly. An unfathomable look flashed in his eyes as if he was thinking about something. A worthy younger brother. Suddenly, a series of footsteps came from outside the hall. Emperor Ziwei, whom he had not seen for a long time, entered the bullfighting palace. This also made Yi Xian come back from his deep thoughts. Brother. Yi Xian cupped his fists and bowed. Emperor Ziwei had helped him in the past. Although he was now a celestial emperor, the two of them still called each other brothers. A worthy younger brother, it's good that you're fine. Emperor Ziwei patted Yi Xian's shoulder affectionately. Obviously, he also knew that Yi Xian had killed Di. This made him feel very comforted. Brother, you don't have to worry. We haven't seen each other in a long time. Today, we must drink to our heart's content. Yi Xian smiled and called for Immortal officials to set up a banquet to welcome Emperor Ziwei. A worthy younger brother, you don't have to do this. I'm relieved to know that you're fine. This time, I'm also here to send you an invitation under Master's orders. Emperor Ziwei smiled and handed the golden invitation to Yi Xian. Immortal Zhen Yuan's invitation? Yi Xian's expression froze for a moment. He received the invitation and looked at it. His eyes narrowed slightly. Ginseng Fruit Convention? Yi Xian whispered. That's right. The Ginseng Fruit Convention will be held 30,000 years later. At that time, all the mighty figures of the three realms will participate. A worthy younger brother, don't miss the time. Emperor Ziwei smiled. The Ginseng Fruit Convention of the ancestor of earthly immortals was extremely famous in the three realms. Not only would grand heavenly immortals participate, but pre-saints would also come. It was definitely not something that the Feast of Peaches of Immortality of the Celestial Court could compare to. Brother, don't worry. I'll be there on time. Yi Xian accepted the invitation. On this day, Yi Xian and Emperor Ziwei toasted each other and talked about their brotherhood. When Emperor Ziwei left, Yi Xian stood alone in the bullfighting palace. There was a sense of urgency in his eyes. Before one wave subsided, another wave arose. The Ginseng Fruit Convention was held at such a sensitive time. How could Yi Xian not think about it? No matter what, I have to go to the Dark North Sea first and see if the Demon Master Kun Peng is still in the human world. If I can enter the Sage to Be in the next 30,000 years, I won't have to fear any great enemies. Yi Xian tapped the table with his fingers and kept making rhythmic sounds. No matter how many times he said it, Yi Xian understood that only by being strong could a person face all difficulties. Yi Xian had always believed in the iron law that the strong were respected. He was the only one who had entered the Sage to Be. He had a faint premonition that perhaps this trip to the Dark North Sea would be his opportunity to enter the Sage to Be. Chapter 691. Time flew by like a shuttle. In the blink of an eye, 1,000 years had passed. Yi Xian did not set off immediately because he still had some matters to deal with in the Celestial Court. Be it the Grand Supreme Elder or the mobilization of the Celestial Court, he had to make sure that nothing went wrong. Only by stabilizing the Celestial Court could he leave with peace of mind. 1,000 years later, an earth-shattering piece of news spread. The ancient demon court had reappeared in the world and would recreate the golden age of the demons in the past. Legend had it that Saint Nuwa was supporting them from behind. However, this rumor was groundless and could not be confirmed. That was not the end. There was another piece of news that caused the three realms to tremble. The Chan school announced to the three realms. The immortals of the Chan school would enter the ancient demon court and officially become its subjects. The deputy sect master of the Chan school, the old man of the South Pole, would become an imperial lord of the ancient demon court. At this moment, he had changed his honorific title and was called the Old Man of the South Pole. When this news spread, the three realms was in an uproar. The entire world was shaken. A huge storm began to brew, causing the people of the three realms to panic. They knew that something terrifying would happen in the future. The disciples of the Chan school and the saint had all joined the ancient demon court. This also proved that it was Yuanshi Tianzuan's attitude. However, don't forget that the disciples of the Jie school were members of the 33rd Heaven's celestial court. The two sects could be said to have a long grudge. This was openly standing on the opposite side of Yixin. Moreover, there could only be one celestial court in the world. This time, the appearance of the ancient demon court and the addition of the Chan school undoubtedly proved that the ancient demon court was the orthodox celestial court. There would definitely be a battle between the two celestial courts. When this news spread to the 33rd Heaven's celestial court, the immortals of the celestial court were in a state of panic. However, Yixin did not show any abnormalities, as if he had already expected this outcome. In the Lingxiao Hall, Heavenly Emperor, the ancient demon court has reappeared in the world. The Chan school has joined in. I'm afraid, Shen Gongbao said with a trembling voice. He wanted to say something but stopped. Not only did Shen Gongbao look worried, but the immortals of the celestial court were also silent. Even the demon kings had complicated expressions on their faces. Obviously, they felt greatly threatened by this news. Moreover, some demon kings had complicated expressions in their eyes. After all, they were demons. If the ancient demon court summoned them, it would be a huge problem whether they should go or not. At this moment, Yixin walked down from the emperor's throne. He looked around at the celestial court and seemed to have guessed everyone's thoughts. However, Yixin had already expected this outcome and did not say anything. The ancient demon court had dealt Yixin a heavy blow. This blow seemed calm, but it had actually shaken the foundation of the celestial court. That was because the ancient demon court was the orthodox demons, and most of his subordinates were demon kings from the lower realm. Only Shen Gongbao and the others were immortals of the Jie school. At this moment, the Chan school had joined the ancient demon court to fight against the rise of the Jie school. Apart from the immortals of the Jie school, the remaining demon kings, except for the sky-devouring toad and the others, were all his trusted aides. If he did not handle it well, there would be a huge change sooner or later. After all, the ancient demon court had reappeared in the world and represented the orthodox demons. They had even fought to recreate the golden age of the demons. How could these demon kings not be moved? Right now, the only thing Yixin was gratified about was that Nuwa hadn't issued a decree yet. The billions of demons in the three realms were still watching from the sidelines. It was obvious that Xueji had contributed greatly to this. You don't have to worry. It's just the ancient demon court. I have my own decision. Yixin spoke calmly without any abnormalities. This also calmed the immortals of the celestial court. Clearly, Yixin was as important as a mountain in their hearts and was their spiritual pillar. As long as Yixin did not fall, no one would dare to betray him. Immeasurable Heavenly Lord. Suddenly, a voice sounded in the Lingxiao Hall. Grand Supreme Elder quietly appeared beside Yixin. He was wearing a purple-gold 8-trigram robe and was looking at everyone with a smile. Then he bowed to Yixin. Greetings, Celestial Emperor. Such a sudden scene stunned the immortals of the celestial court. When they saw Grand Supreme Elder appear, everyone turned into clay puppets and did not recover for a long time. Grand Supreme Elder? Shen Gongbao growled in shock. He looked at Grand Supreme Elder with great shock. He never thought that the legendary figure would appear in the celestial court. At this moment, He even bowed to Yi Xian like a subject. Not only Shen Gongbao, but the other immortals and demon kings were the same. They looked at Grand Supreme Elder with great surprise and a deep sense of respect. There were too many legends about Grand Supreme Elder, but the most shocking one was that Grand Supreme Elder was the incarnation of the sage Lao Tzu. How could they not have heard of this legend? From today onwards, Grand Supreme Elder will oversee the celestial court. If a great enemy invades, he will be able to suppress them. Yi Xian looked around at the immortals of the celestial court and said calmly. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Shen Gongbao was the first to react. He looked at Yi Xian with surprise and asked, Celestial Emperor, are you leaving the celestial court? Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not answer this question. Instead, he strolled out of the Lingxiao Hall. This made the immortals of the celestial court not dare to ask more. In the bullfighting palace, Yi Xian was dressed in black. A door opened in front of him. It was the door to the lower world. The Empyrean fairy stood beside him and looked at him worriedly. Are you really leaving? The Empyrean fairy bit her lips and asked. I walk the path of cultivation through strength. If I don't become a sage-to-be, I won't be able to fight against many great enemies. I'll have to trouble you while I'm away. Yi Xian stroked the Empyrean fairy's hair bun. Since he returned to the celestial court, the two of them had not been together. Now that he was leaving, the Empyrean fairy felt guilty. Yi Xian, you must remember that I'm your wife. I'll always wait for your return in the celestial court. You must come back alive to see me. The Empyrean fairy suddenly smiled. She gently leaned her head into Yi Xian's arms, but a touch of moisture wet Yi Xian's chest. This made Yi Xian slightly startled, and a complicated look appeared in his eyes. Okay, go quickly. I'll wait for you to come back. Suddenly, the Empyrean fairy pushed Yi Xian away and quickly turned around. She didn't want to look at Yi Xian again, but her face was full of tears. She clearly didn't want Yi Xian to see her cry. Take care. Yi Xian took a deep breath and suddenly entered the door of light. As the door closed with a rumble, Yi Xian also disappeared from the bullfighting palace. With Yi Xian's departure, the Empyrean fairy slowly turned around. Her face was full of tears. She stared blankly at the place where Yi Xian disappeared, and her voice echoed in the bullfighting palace. No matter what happens in the future, I'll always be your wife. You must come back alive to see me. A wisp of emotion, a wisp of hidden bitterness, and even a deep expectation could not express the Empyrean fairy's feelings for Yi Xian. Chapter 692. Earth Immortal Realm, North Sea. The North Sea was vast, and the sky and water were connected. From time to time, monstrous waves would rise, accompanied by the rumbling sound of the waves. However, the cold wind of the world blew past, giving people a bone-piercing chill. If a mortal was here, they would definitely be frozen stiff by the cold wind. The waves were turbulent and the glaciers were visible. The huge waves kept pushing the ice peaks on the surface of the sea, creating a rare scene. Buzz. A divine light appeared on the surface of the sea. The light was not dazzling, but it could not be looked at directly. As the light slowly dissipated, Yi Xian's figure appeared. According to the map, the door to the northern underworld sea should be here. Yi Xian looked around the sea, his eyes moving slightly as if he was sensing something. This was the deepest part of the North Sea. It was bitterly cold all year round. Even fish and prawns could not survive in this part of the sea. Few people set foot in this harsh environment. Yi Xian came here according to the map, but all he saw was glaciers. He did not even see ordinary fish or prawns, let alone the so-called northern underworld sea. A pair of Dharma eyes shone through the void. The indestructible true spirit buzzed and rotated. Yi Xian was calmly sensing the changes in this part of the sea. However, after a long time, he did not find anything different. Impossible, the North Sea Old Dragon King would not dare to lie to me. This map is so important to him, and it has the mark of the Kuan Peng on it. It can't be fake. Yi Xian frowned and muttered to himself. However, what puzzled Yi Xian was that he could sense the sea for thousands of miles, but he did not find anything strange. Where was the door to the northern underworld sea? Suddenly Yi Xian's eyes lit up as if he had thought of something. He looked directly at the sea under his feet. Open! The waves split and the surface of the sea was broken. Yi Xian directly dived into the North Sea, and his body was instantly submerged. Darkness, endless darkness. As Yi Xian continued to dive, the water around him parted. At first, he could still see the beautiful scenery at the bottom of the sea, but as Yi Xian went deeper and deeper into the sea, the surrounding light dimmed until it turned into endless darkness. 30,000 meters, 100,000 meters, 1,000,000 meters. Yi Xian didn't know how deep he had dived, but the water pressure around him was getting more and more terrifying. If it wasn't for his extremely tyrannical body, even Daluo Jingxian would have suffered great injuries after diving so deep into the sea. A full 3 days passed, and a ripple of light flickered on the boundless seabed. This light was extremely dazzling in the pitch-black seabed, and it gave off a feeling of incomparable beauty. Found it? Yi Xian's face lit up with joy. He took a step forward and shot towards the source of the light. The rippling door flickered slightly. This was a miniature door that only one person could pass through at a time. At this moment, it was emitting bits of green light, and a hint of the vast expanse's aura emanated from the door. Without any hesitation or fear, Yi Xian entered the door and disappeared from the bottom of the North Sea. This was a dusky world. There was no sun, no moon, and no stars in the sky. There was only the boundless black sea and the gray sky. The sea was pitch black and calm, making it impossible to see the end of the sea. It was like a land of death, and there were no so-called living creatures living in it. The sky was gray and covered with dark clouds. From time to time, lightning could be seen flashing in the clouds, and the sound of thunder could be heard. It added a mysterious and terrifying feeling to this place. Yi Xian took a step forward, causing ripples to appear. Yi Xian quietly appeared in this world. When he saw the scene before him, his brows slightly furrowed. "This is the northern underworld sea?" Yi Xian whispered in surprise. This scene was different from what he had imagined. He had thought that the northern underworld sea was a paradise, but the world spirit chi here was thin, and it gave people a feeling of death. It was too different from what he had imagined. Rumble. Suddenly, Yi Xian's body was surrounded by chaotic divine light. He was like a golden sun, blooming with boundless light and illuminating the boundless sea. Then he walked slowly in the void. It was as if the war drums of the 9 heavens were beating, as if the heavens were exploding. With every step Yi Xian took, the entire world rumbled and shook, and the surface of the sea that was like stagnant water was even raising monstrous waves. Yi Xian deliberately made such a loud noise because if the Kunpeng was still alive, it would definitely lure him out. However, to Yi Xian's disappointment, the demon master Kunpeng did not appear. It was as if the northern underworld sea was a land of death, and there were no living creatures at all. "Demon master, please come out and meet me." Yi Xian stood on the surface of the sea, and huge waves rose behind him. His voice reverberated in all directions, but unfortunately, no one responded. "Interesting." Yi Xian smiled. The chaotic divine light slowly dissipated, and there was no longer any aura around him. He walked on the surface of the sea and walked towards the depths of the northern underworld sea. The world was silent, and everything was silent. Yi Xian walked calmly on the surface of the sea. However, with every step he took, he covered a distance of tens of thousands of miles. He only smiled when he saw a small island in front of him. There was an island where not a single blade of grass grew. It was like a dead land. What was surprising was that the shape of the island was like a bird's nest. There was a pitch-black hole that looked like the mouth of a taotai. It gave people a terrifying feeling. No one knew where this place led to. Yi Xian's feet stomped on the ground, causing the entire island to tremble. He also looked towards the black hole and saw a mottled stone tablet rooted to the side of the hole. 3 large words were engraved on the stone tablet. Kunpeng's nest? Yi Xian paused for a moment as he read out the words on the stone tablet. A trace of a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. The stone tablet was very old, and the words engraved on it were ancient demonic words. However, Since Yi Xian entered the Earth Immortal realm, he had studied the languages of various races in addition to cultivation. Naturally, he could recognize the ancient demonic words on the stone tablet. Deliberately mystifying. Let's see what tricks you have up your sleeves. Yi Xian smiled coldly and walked into the Kunpeng's nest. Obviously, he did not believe that the demon master Kunpeng had fallen. He must be in the Kunpeng's nest. Inside the Kunpeng's nest, the path was paved with blue stones, and the walls were modeled. Obviously, it was man-made. There were bright pearls on both sides of the path, and they would not be extinguished even after thousands of years. Yi Xian did not encounter any danger along the way. Occasionally, he would see some white bones scattered on the ground. There were no other strange scenes. These white bones were of different shapes. As Yi Xian went deeper, more and more white bones appeared on the ground. Obviously, in the distant past, many living creatures had explored this place, but without exception, they all died in vain. The white bones paved the path, and they were crystal clear. Immortal demonic light bloomed on the white bones. Obviously, these dead creatures were demon kings and immortals when they were alive. Chapter 693. Yi Xian walked slowly. His senses were extremely sensitive and he could feel that there was a pair of eyes spying on him. However, when he tried to look for them, the owner of the eyes could not find them. It was as if the owner of the eyes had sensed that he had attracted Yi Xian's attention. After 2 hours, a mottled stone door appeared in front of him, allowing Yi Xian to walk to the end of the passageway. The stone door was ancient and weathered. It was engraved with ancient demon characters and a yin-yang taiji diagram. A fish was swimming on the stone door, giving off a mysterious and boundless feeling. Rumble. When Yi Xian stood in front of the stone door, he saw the fish swimming rapidly on the stone door, causing the entire stone door to rumble open. A boundless and vast aura poured out from the stone door. The aura of desolation? Yi Xian muttered to himself as the stone door opened and light shone in all directions. A look of surprise flashed in his eyes as he walked into the stone door. There was a house and a clear pool. A black-clothed, white-haired man stood beside the pool with his hands behind his back. He was looking at the beautiful scene in the pool with his back facing Yi Xian. A black and white fish with a strange shape was swimming in the pool. Some small fish and prawns were eaten by the black and white fish, and when the fish's tail flapped, it caused small splashes to appear in the pool. This is a Kuan fish, right? Yi Xian walked over and stood beside the black-clothed, white-haired man. He also looked at the pool like a person and his voice was very calm. Right now, he is only a Kuan fish. When the wind and clouds of the 9 heavens gather, he will grow a pair of wings and soar above the 9 heavens. At that time, he will no longer be a Kuan fish, but a Kunpeng. The black-clothed, white-haired man said calmly. He finally retracted his gaze from the pool and looked calmly at Yi Xian. He was dressed in black and had white hair. He had a handsome appearance and his cheeks seemed to have been carved by a knife. He looked like a young man and was even more worthy of the title of handsome man. However, his eyes were deep and vicissitudes of life did not match his youthful appearance. It was as if he was an old man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. Demon Master Kunpeng? Time seemed to have stopped and space seemed to have frozen. When the two of them looked at each other, the world suddenly froze. Ripples appeared in the void. The void was slightly distorted. The two of them looked at each other without saying a word. Although neither of them released their auras, an invisible battle had already begun. Suddenly, a muffled sound came from the void. The Kunpeng took a step back and the void rippled. The stagnant heaven and earth seemed to be moving again at this moment. My fellow cultivator's cultivation is impressive. Kunpeng nodded and praised him sincerely. You can't be that weak. Yi Xian slowly shook his head and said calmly. Although the two of them did not attack each other, the battle between their minds had already started. This was a competition of potentials. However, Kunpeng was slightly inferior and was defeated in this invisible battle. However, Yi Xian was very confused. Demon Master Kunpeng was as famous as the 2 celestial emperors. Although he was not as powerful as Donghuang Tai and Emperor Jun, the difference was not big. However, in Yi Xian's perception, Demon Master Kunpeng's cultivation was only an ordinary sage-to-be. He was no match for him at all. In the Great War of Witches and Demons, I was seriously injured by the two ancestors of Sorcerer. My physical body was destroyed and only my genuine spirit survived. Since then, I have returned to this place to heal my injuries. I am no longer as powerful as before. Kunpeng smiled bitterly. Hearing Kunpeng's words, Yi Xian's eyes moved slightly. He said calmly, "Obviously, those demon kings and immortals outside were also killed by you? My fellow cultivator is right. They were greedy and thought that I had already died. They wanted to steal my inheritance, so I had to kill them." Kunpeng said softly. "Oh, is that so?" Yi Xian's mouth curved into a strange smile, which made Kunpeng's eyes dim. However, they soon returned to normal and did not reveal any strange expression. "I wonder why you have come to visit me?" Kunpeng did not answer the question. "The ancient demon court has appeared." Yi Xian did not hide anything, nor did he talk nonsense. When he said this, Kunpeng's face did not change, and he was not shocked at all. In the Great War of Witches and Demons, the two tribes withered. The two celestial emperors led thousands of demon cultivators to recuperate. It is not strange that they have appeared again. "But I wonder who you are and why you have come to see me this time?" Kunpeng asked softly. "Celestial Emperor Yi Xian." When Yi Xian said these simple words, Kunpeng directly understood Yi Xian's identity. He looked at Yi Xian with a deep look in his eyes. "There are no two suns in the sky, and no two rulers in the people. It seems that my fellow cultivator is the master of the celestial court in this world. However, the ancient demon court has reappeared, and my fellow cultivator's position as the celestial emperor is about to be lost. Even if my fellow cultivator comes to ask me for help, I can't help." Kunpeng sighed. "You are wrong. I'm not asking you for help. I hope that you can join the celestial court and become my subject, Yi Xian, and create a real prosperity with me." Yi Xian said calmly, as if he was talking about a very casual thing. However, Kunpeng's face turned cold when he heard this. He looked at Yi Xian with an extremely unfriendly look. "My fellow cultivator, you are so arrogant. Do you know that even East Emperor and Emperor Jun dare not make me submit to them? Your cultivation is not comparable to theirs. Do you think that my cultivation has fallen greatly at this moment, so you want to threaten me with force?" Kunpeng scolded coldly. No. Yi Xian waved his hand slowly, with a gentle smile on his face. However, his eyes became extremely unpredictable when he looked at Kunpeng. "I'm not someone who takes advantage of others, so I naturally won't do such a thing to you. However, sooner or later, I will have a battle with the ancient demon court, and as the master of 10,000 demons, I'm afraid that you will become my, Yi Xian's, enemy in the future. Then, I can only be disrespectful to you." Yi Xian's voice gradually turned cold. The chaotic divine light steamed out, as if he was going to attack Kunpeng in the next moment. Kunpeng's face changed slightly, and he took 3 steps back. He looked at Yi Xian more cautiously. "My fellow cultivator, please listen to me," Kunpeng said quickly. "What do you want to say?" Yi Xian sneered. "I can swear to my Taoist friend that I will never return to the ancient demon court. If I violate this oath, I will definitely be destroyed." The Kunpeng swore the Great Heart Demon Oath with an extremely sincere expression on his face. The Great Oath of the Heart Demon was an extremely terrifying oath. If one violated the oath, he would be counterattacked by the Heart Demon. Not only would his cultivation be unable to improve for the rest of his life, but he would also be in danger of his soul being destroyed. Obviously, Kunpeng swore such a vicious oath to avoid being killed by Yi Xian. "My fellow cultivator, I have already sworn to my great oath of the Heart Demon. With my current cultivation, even if I return to the ancient demon court, I will not be a threat to you at all. Please don't make things difficult for me." Chapter 694. Moreover, my cultivation has dropped greatly. I only want to recover from my injuries here, so I no longer have the heart to participate in the dispute between the 3 realms. Fellow Taoist, please help me. The Kuan Peng bowed in an extremely humble manner as it pleaded with Yi Xian. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed as he looked at the Kuan Peng's attitude. He slowly nodded and said, "All right, since fellow Taoist has sworn the Great Heart Demon Oath, if I were to make things difficult for fellow Taoist, it would be obvious that I, Yi Xian, don't have the ability to tolerate others. Remember your vow. I hope you and I will not be enemies in the future," Yi Xian coldly said. He suddenly turned around and returned to his original path. This also caused the Kuan Peng to bow. Only when he saw Yi Xian disappear did he straighten his back and let out a dispirited sigh. Alas! At this moment, the Kuan Peng seemed to be in his twilight years. He returned to the edge of the lake dispiritedly and then sat down cross-legged to cultivate. It was as if countless years had passed and he had really been recovering from his injuries. The void of primordial spirit and the heavens did not appear. This was a forbidden secret skill in the Immortal scripture and also Yi Xian's trump card. In the past, he had fought with Yuan Ling for a long time with the void of primordial spirit. From this, one could see the horror of this skill. At this moment, Yi Xian escaped into the void and went back to the way he came. He did not release any aura around him and no one could feel his existence. When Yi Xian stepped into the half-step sage to be, he was more proficient in the void of primordial spirit. As long as his aura did not leak out, no one could detect his existence except for the sages. That's right, Yi Xian didn't plan on leaving at all, nor would he leave so easily. This was because there were too many suspicious points on the Kuan Peng. Although it seemed to be begging Yi Xian humbly and lowering its attitude to the extreme, it still caused Yi Xian to become even more suspicious. First of all, the white bones outside the passageway was a huge question. The Kuan Peng nest was so secretive that even he could only find this place by following the map. How could other people enter this place? Secondly, Kuan Peng's attitude was extremely humble, without any trace of the spirit of the master of demons. This was simply a fantasy. Kuan Peng was an extremely arrogant and fierce being. Otherwise, how could he become the master of demons? The third point was also Yi Xian's greatest doubt. One had to know that the Kuan Peng was the imperial teacher of the ancient demon court. Even though the two heavenly emperors had to respectfully address him as demon master, the Kuan Peng had sworn an oath to his heart demon, claiming that he would never return to the ancient demon court. For him to pay such a huge price, there must be a heaven-shaking secret hidden within. Something was wrong with the Kuan Peng. These 5 simple words explained what Yi Xian was thinking. He hid in the void to spy on the Kuan Peng. He wanted to see what kind of secret the Kuan Peng was hiding. After so many years, it was hiding here alone. There were continuous mountains and clear water. This place was a small world. Except for the Kuan Peng, there were no other living creatures. Only the black and white fish in the pool were swimming every day. Yi Xian had observed the black and white fish. He was sure that the black and white fish were not living creatures. They were transformed from the real spirit of the Kuan Peng and were placed in the pool to cultivate. Obviously, he was seriously injured in the Great War of Witch Demon. This was not fake. Although there was no sun and moon, Yi Xian had the concept of time. It had been 3 months since he left in front of the Kuan Peng. However, the Kuan Peng was meditating by the pool every day and did not show any strange expression. Yi Xian was never short of patience. He did not believe that the Kuan Peng was fine. This was a silent competition. It depended on whose patience was exhausted. Yi Xian also believed that the Kuan Peng must be hiding something. 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 100 years. 100 years passed in a hurry. Yi Xian was in the void. He did not speak or move. He never gave up observing the Kuan Peng. However, to Yi Xian's disappointment, the Kuan Peng was still cultivating as usual. He rarely left his residence, as if this was his daily life. No, it must be wrong. Even though he was cultivating his body and healing his injuries, he could not do the same thing every day. There must be something wrong. Yi Xian said coldly in his heart. He wanted to calm down again. He wanted to see when the Kuan Peng would reveal his secret. 100 years, 1,000 years, 3,000 years, 5,000 years. A full 5,000 years had passed. To mortals, this was simply unimaginable. However, to Yi Xian, although these 5,000 years were boring, he was still observing the Kunpeng while practicing various secret techniques in his mind. Although his cultivation hadn't advanced, his various abilities had become more and more proficient. However, what made Yi Xian even more disappointed was that after 5,000 years, this Kunpeng was truly a difficult fellow to deal with. Normally, other than cultivating himself, he would grow flowers and plants, as if he was a leisurely old man. Yi Xian's eyes were gloomy. He emptied his mind and practiced the secret skills in the immortal scripture again. However, the immortal true spirit in his sea of consciousness was running all the time. He was staring at the Kunpeng all the time. 6,000 years, 7,000 years, 9,000 years. A full 9,000 years had passed. During this boring wait, Yi Xian didn't know how many times he wanted to leave. However, he endured it in the end and constantly warned himself in his heart that the Kunpeng was definitely not simple. 10,000 years. When 10,000 years had passed, there was finally a change in the Kunpeng, causing Yi Xian to instantly wake up from his cultivation. When his eyes opened and closed, they silently rotated as he stared fixedly at the Kunpeng. Beside the pool, the Kunpeng's gentleness was gone. His aura became extremely gloomy. He spat out a mouthful of turbid air. His arms were slowly stretching out as if he had been freed. Yi Xian, you almost ruined my plan. When I condense the immortal demon body, the first thing I will do is to destroy your soul. The Kunpeng said coldly. An extremely fierce murderous intent burst out. Apparently, during these 10,000 years, he had been disguising himself. He was afraid that Yi Xian would come back and spy on him secretly. Although the Kunpeng was powerful and did not feel that Yi Xian was spying on him, he always believed that there was no harm in being careful. This was why he had been disguising himself for 10,000 years. It had to be said that the Kunpeng was indeed an ambitious person. In order to keep his secret, he would rather endure 10,000 years of boredom. This was indeed something that ordinary people could not do. Unfortunately, the Kunpeng didn't know that Yi Xian was an even more determined person. He, the Kunpeng, had been able to endure and disguise himself for 10,000 years. Yi Xian had even fought to the death with him and hadn't left. Come. The Kunpeng's face was flushed. He made a spell with his hands. The black and white fish in the pool shot out and merged into his glabella. At this moment his chi power was rising. His cultivation had reached an extremely terrifying level. He did not look like he had been seriously injured at all. Little ant, if it were not for the fact that killing you would attract attention from the outside world, you would not be able to leave here alive. The Kunpeng growled ferociously. Apparently, it was a great humiliation for him to compromise with Yi Xian. If it were not for the secret of this place, he would have killed Yi Xian. How could he beg Yi Xian for his life? Chapter 695. At this moment, Kunpeng was at his peak and could be called a peerless expert among the sage-to-be. He was only slightly inferior to Eastern Emperor Tai Emperor Jun. From this, one could see how terrifying Kunpeng, the master of demons, was. At this moment, Yi Xian escaped into the void and restrained his aura to the extreme. He stared at Kunpeng maliciously. Obviously, Kunpeng was much stronger than him at this moment. If Kunpeng discovered his existence, they would definitely have a great battle. This was not the result that Yi Xian had been waiting for 10,000 years. He really left. It seems that I have overestimated this guy. Kunpeng stood with his hands behind his back and carefully sensed this world. After 2 hours, he murmured and finally confirmed that there was no one else here. The ancestral dragon blood formation is only one step away from completion. As long as I can refine the ancestral dragon's essence blood, I can refine the indestructible demon body that no one has ever cultivated. At that time, even the ancestral magi's body can't be compared to mine. Kunpeng roared excitedly and his expression was even more deranged. He turned into a stream of light and shot toward the east. Ancestral dragon blood formation? Hearing Kunpeng's words, Yi Xian murmured. His eyes froze in an instant and a fiery light flashed across his eyes. Yi Xian didn't know what the ancestral dragon blood formation was, but he knew what kind of existence the ancestral dragon was. As everyone knew, there were a total of 3 great tribulations in this world since Pangu created the world. The Great God Investiture Tribulation, the Great Magi Demon War, and the Great Dragon Han Tribulation. The first 2 were already known by all living things. The Great Dragon Han Tribulation was the first tribulation in the world and almost broke through the untainted land. When Pangu created the world, all living things were ignorant. Hongjun had yet to become a sage and the 3 pure ones were only Daluo Jingxian. In that era, there were 3 strongest races: the Dragon race, the Phoenix race, and the Kylan race. These 3 races were born by the world and were born in the Zenith Heaven realm. They were the favorites of the world and the 3 main characters when the world was created. Phoenixes were the leaders of the birds and lived in the undying volcano. Qilins were the leaders of the beasts and lived in the Buzhou celestial mountain. Dragons were the kings of the sea monsters and occupied the entire ocean. These 3 races were called the 3 races of the untainted land and were the 3 most powerful races in the untainted land. The Dragon, Phoenix, and Qilin clans were blessed by the heavens. They were born with great abilities, so they refused to accept each other, which led to the eruption of a great war. The Dragon clan was born with a tyrannical physical body. Ordinary magical treasures and weapons could not harm them. However, the Phoenix clan could be reborn. They were also very powerful. The Qilin clan was not outstanding in any way, but they had a lot of people, which led to the joint attack of the Dragon and Phoenix. When the Dragons and Phoenixes had almost wiped out the Kirin clan, they also started fighting among themselves. In the end, the Dragon race and the Phoenix race both withered away. Even the ancestral dragon fell in the world. The ancestral Phoenix also died in the untainted land. Thus, the 3 races completely withdrew from the stage of history. Only then did the Liches dominate the untainted land. The topic was a little off topic, but Yi Xian knew something very important. Since the beginning of the world, the race with the strongest physical body was the Wu clan. However, the real strongest race was the 5-clawed golden dragon of the Dragon clan. The 5-clawed golden dragon was the real Dragon clan. As for the Dragon kings of the 4 seas, they were only collateral bloodlines of the Azure Dragon, Red Dragon, White Dragon, and so on. They could not be compared with the Golden Dragon clan. However, during the initial tribulation of the Dragon Han clan, the Golden Dragon clan all died out. Even the ancestral dragon fell in the world. From then on, the Golden Dragon clan no longer existed in the world. Thus, the Wu clan obtained the title of having the strongest physical body. The ancestral dragon was the strongest in the Golden Dragon clan. His physical body surpassed that of the 12 ancestors of sorcery in antiquity times. When the Kunping mentioned the ancestral dragon blood formation and the ancestral dragon essence blood, how could Yi Xian not be shocked? If Yi Xian could get the ancestral dragon essence blood and use it to refine his Daluo immortal body, Yi Xian was very sure that he would be able to practice the Daluo immortal body to the advanced level. The Daluo immortal body and the indestructible true spirit. When the spirit and body became one, Yi Xian would truly become a sage to be. From then on, as long as the saints did not appear, he would not be afraid of any sage to be. Yi Xian's body and mind were trembling. He had not waited for 10,000 years in vain. This also made him restrain his aura to the extreme and quietly chase after the Kunpeng. Soaring 90,000 miles into the sky, the Kunpeng spread its wings across the 9 heavens. This phrase also proved how fast the Kunpeng was. When he unleashed all of his power, his entire body would disappear into the void. No one would be able to catch his figure. Yi Xian was using the primordial spirit void. His entire body was one with the void, and he was able to capture the Kunpeng's trajectory. This also allowed him to quietly follow behind him. After half a day, a giant mountain that pierced the sky could be faintly seen in the distance. It was like a dragon that stretched across the world. It was also at this time that the Kunpeng's agitated body gradually slowed down. Open! Suddenly, the Kunpeng's face flushed red. He formed a seal with both hands. Extremely dazzling demonic light gushed out from his palms and directly gathered into ancient demonic characters. They interweaved into a mysterious formation that rumbled and rotated in the sky. Rumble. The sky shook and the void swayed. This part of the world became extremely distorted. The giant mountain that pierced the sky quickly became illusory until its original appearance was revealed. There was a sky-piercing mountain and a gigantic dragon skeleton. The dragon skeleton was hundreds of thousands of miles long and was coiled around the sky-piercing mountain. The pale golden skeleton was emitting specks of golden light, and a wild and boundless aura was swirling around it. The remains of the ancestral dragon. Yi Xian hid in the void. When he saw this scene, he roared in his heart and almost leaked his aura. This also proved how excited he was. Rumble. Before Yi Xian could react, the Kunpeng laughed maniacally and surged towards the giant mountain. This also caused Yi Xian to quickly follow behind him. However, there was a trace of viciousness in his eyes. On the giant mountain that pierced the sky, streaks of blood-colored formation patterns interweaved in the void and gathered into a strange and mysterious formation pattern. It was buzzing and rotating, releasing a strange and unpredictable aura. There was a blood pool that was emitting a piercingly cold golden light. The golden blood pool was steaming and bubbles were rising from it. An extremely domineering aura was leaking to the outside world. However, there was a blood-colored formation pattern that completely blocked the domineering aura. The Kunpeng stood proudly on the peak. He stared at the golden blood pool in front of him and his eyes flickered with excitement. After that, he did not hesitate and quickly walked towards the golden blood pool. Finally, the Kunpeng came to the front of the golden blood pool. He did not move forward and just looked at the thing in front of him. There was a complicated and trembling light in his eyes. The ancestral dragon blood formation has been completed. However, the blood essence of 10,000 demons is still lacking. If this damn Yi Xian did not find this place, why would I take the risk to refine the ancestral dragon blood essence in advance? The Kunpeng murmured with hatred. No, Yi Xian already knows about this place. I have to take the risk. If he spreads the news that I am here, the secret of the ancestral dragon blood essence will be exposed sooner or later. Chapter 696. The Kunpeng was talking to himself as he paced around the golden blood pool. Apparently, the golden blood pool was formed by the ancestral dragon's blood essence, and this was his biggest secret. But the 10,000 demons' essence blood is still lacking. If I forcefully integrate the ancestral dragon's essence blood into my body to cultivate the undying demon body, I'm afraid it will be extremely dangerous. The Kunpeng's face was gloomy and his eyes were filled with hesitation. In the void, Yi Xian squinted his eyes and a wisp of enlightenment appeared in his mind. It also allowed Yi Xian to finally solve the previous puzzle. Most of the white bones that died outside the passage were demon kings. Apparently, they were all killed by the Kunpeng. However, the reason why they could find this place was because the Kunpeng had lured them here for the so-called 10,000 demons' essence blood. If Yi Xian guessed correctly, the Kunpeng wanted to integrate the ancestral dragon's essence blood into his body, but his body couldn't withstand such power. The 10,000 demons' essence blood should be a medium that could reduce the domineering power of the ancestral dragon's essence blood, allowing him to swallow it without any risk. As the saying goes, one can know the whole leopard from a single spot. In the past, the North Sea Dragon King invited all the demon kings to a banquet and even said that the Kunpeng's inheritance was in the North Sea. Obviously, the North Sea Dragon King didn't have good intentions. He wanted to lure all the demon kings here so that the Kunpeng could collect the 10,000 demons' essence blood. From this, it could be seen that the North Sea Dragon King was already controlled by the Kunpeng. However, the Kunpeng never expected that the North Sea Dragon King would die in the hands of Yi Xian and the entire North Sea Dragon Palace would be slaughtered. This also happened to cut off the Kunpeng's source of collecting the 10,000 demons' essence blood. At this point, all the puzzles about the North Sea had been solved. The Kunpeng humbly swore the great oath of the heart demon to him. The white bones outside the passage and the reason why the North Sea Dragon King invited all the demon kings to explore the North Sea had been revealed. However, a tinge of fear grew in Yi Xian's heart. If he really came here with the map back then, he would definitely be killed by the Kunpeng with his cultivation. At that time. Fortunately, Yi Xian was an extremely cautious person and a very secretive person. In the end, he wasn't blinded by desire and didn't come to explore this place back then. At this moment, Yi Xian's eyes narrowed as he watched from the shadows. His gaze towards the Kunpeng was even more cruel. He was even more determined to obtain the ancestral dragon's blood essence. This was because Yi Xian could completely feel that if he could use the ancestral dragon's blood essence to refine his great Luo immortal body, he would definitely be able to reach large success and truly step into the quasi-sage realm. However, Yi Xian didn't attack the Kunpeng at this moment because Yi Xian knew his own limits. At this moment, the Kunpeng was at its peak state. With his current cultivation, he wasn't a match for the Kunpeng. Moreover, if he really did appear, the two of them would definitely have an earth-shattering battle for the ancestral dragon's essence blood. The space here would be shattered into pieces, and it would definitely attract the attention of the outside world. Then it would not only be a battle between the two of them. Any sage-to-be who received the news would join in the battle. The danger involved would be unimaginable. Obviously, the Kunpeng was afraid of such a thing happening. The Kunpeng's attitude towards Yi Xian was extremely humble. Otherwise, how could the Kunpeng be so humble to Yi Xian with his fierce and arrogant temperament? Yi Xian had waited for 10,000 years. He didn't care about this little bit of time. He had to make his move when he was most confident. The essence blood could only belong to him. Heaven and earth were silent, and not a sound could be heard. After 3 days and 3 nights, the Kunpeng finally returned from his contemplation. His gloomy face turned calm, as if he had made a decision. Although the essence blood of 10,000 demons is still lacking and can't completely neutralize the overbearing power of the essence blood of ancestral dragon, I have to take the risk. This place has been exposed to Yi Xian. Sooner or later, trouble will arise. But if I really activate the ancestral dragon blood formation, the power of the essence blood of ancestral dragon will be fully released. If there are any disturbances, I'm afraid all my efforts will be in vain. The Kunpeng said coldly, his eyes looking around the void. This also made Yi Xian restrain his aura. He didn't expect the Kunpeng to be so cautious at this time. It seems that I'm overthinking. 10,000 years have passed. Yi Xian has already left. Although there is no one to protect me here, who can find this place? The Kunpeng laughed at himself, feeling that he was too suspicious. As long as I can cultivate the indestructible demon body, no one can be my opponent except a sage. When I find the Hong Meng immortal chi, I can even peek at the position of the 7th sage. The Kunpeng roared ferociously. He made a mysterious demon art with both hands. His body was surrounded by bright demon light. Ancient demon characters appeared and were directly inserted into the ancestral dragon blood formation. Rumble. Heaven and earth shook. The blood formation rotated. The ancestral dragon blood formation in the void fell directly into the golden blood pool, causing a drastic change to the blood formation. Buzz. The ancestral dragon blood essence revolved rapidly until it turned into a terrifying vortex. Waves of destructive power erupted from the ancestral dragon blood pool. Dazzling golden light soared into the sky. Numerous phantoms of golden dragons tore through space and time in all directions. Dragon roars that could shatter the world faintly resounded. It was a terrifying scene that no one dared to look directly at. Now, the Kunpeng roared excitedly. He took a step forward and jumped into the ancestral dragon blood pool. He was submerged in the ancestral dragon essence blood. At the same time, he made a mysterious demon art and began to absorb the extremely powerful power of the ancestral dragon essence blood. The Kunpeng let out a groan. His face was extremely distorted. Under the ancestral dragon essence blood, his body was cracking inch by inch. Obviously, the ancestral dragon essence blood was extremely domineering. Even though the Kunpeng's cultivation was terrifying, he was still greatly tempered by it. At this moment, Yi Xian squinted his eyes and stared at the Kunpeng in the ancestral dragon blood pool. A cruel and sinister look flashed across his eyes. He slowly raised his hand as if he was going to attack the Kunpeng in the next moment. Suddenly Yi Xian frowned. He slowly put down his hand and didn't attack the Kunpeng in the end. It wasn't that Yi Xian didn't want to attack the Kunpeng, but Yi Xian discovered something. If he really attacked the Kunpeng when he was cultivating, even if he could severely injure the Kunpeng, the power of the ancestral dragon essence blood would dissipate between heaven and earth. This was definitely not the result he wanted to see. You want the ancestral dragon essence blood? You're dreaming! Yi Xian roared cruelly. He didn't hesitate anymore. His primordial spirit void secret technique disappeared without a trace. He suddenly appeared in the void and jumped into the ancestral dragon blood pool with a greedy and ruthless look. Since he couldn't kill the Kunpeng, Yi Xian would snatch it and see who could devour the ancestral dragon essence blood. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.